Tracy, I have this other thing ready to go, so I got to post it to cut and paste and put that in. Can you hear me?
Yep, and I think I found it online. I'm going to share it with all of them.
Yeah, it's on the calendar.
Yep. I think that we were all looking on the regular website. So thanks, Allison.
Sure.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Thumbs up.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
cool.
Hey, Ryan.
Thank you. Hey, boy, I hope, I don't know if anyone else was having weird internet issues today, but Superior was just a mess this morning and yesterday. So let's hope we don't have similar issues tonight.
Tracy, let me know if your person can get in and everything's okay.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
So I did hear from Joel. He's going to be late or maybe on the phone. He has a family conflict, and then Frank's coming back from vacation or camping or something, and so he said he might be able to make it, but we might be short 2 members today. We'll still have quorum if everyone else shows up, and so we should be fine. Tracy, did you have a chance to talk to Justin ahead of time at all?
I didn't. We just
Okay.
emailed, and he confirmed that he could make it. So
Okay.
that was really my bad. I should have
No, it's fine. I just I'm
better
just
on
trying to
expectations for him.
figure out. I mean, I guess essentially what we have is permission to have him reach out. So it would just be to answer any questions that he might have or provide any guidance that we think we can give them about reaching out to that owner.
Yeah, and Allison can fill in the blanks on that, but it sounded like it was more of a formality thing that Matt wanted him to meet with us
Yeah.
for, so it was all in public.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. So I don't think it'll be necessarily a long conversation, but I think it's good to talk about the issues that we see around it and maybe some possible approaches. And it'd just be good to talk to Justin again.
He's invited, so he should be here. He got his
Okay.
invite. And for our public comment, if you just look in the chat on the instructions, if you have public comment, that would be great.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, there's 4 of us, so we don't have quorum yet. Like I said, Kate, before you came on, I did hear from Joel. He may be late, and Frank was iffy also tonight.
Okay. All right. Trying to get a little more organized here.
I want to make sure this is Tracy because she came in under an attendee.
There we go.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark. That's where it was. Okay.
I'll be right back. I'm just gonna fill my water.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. So we have 5, so we do have quorum. And there's Rainer, so that's it. That's all that we expect this evening.
Hello.
Okay. Hey, Rainer. So good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Open Space Advisory Committee meeting for the 11th of November. Happy Veterans Day to any of you veterans. Kara, I know for sure. So happy Veterans Day. Allison, I know your husband and your family. So, happy Veterans Day to you. Thank you.
All right, got you, Ryan.
Oh yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. All right, we'll do roll call. So we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. I'll start. So Ryan Welch, the OSAC chair.
I'm Kate Senecal. I'm the vice chair.
Rainer Kunz, member.
Tracy Collar, member.
Tracy Bain, member.
Kara Noisy, member.
Mark Laces, town board liaison.
Allison James, staff liaison.
Okay, thank you all. Getting to the agenda, before we get to any corrections or changes, we're doing this agenda slightly different than we normally would, where we normally would. So the issue that we have is it's been sort of an OSAC tradition to take December off, just a chance to recharge, and it's around the holidays. So we are thinking we might be able to do the same, but it's only if we can get through this list of work this evening. So this is a lot of topics. It's the most busy agenda I think I've ever put together. My plan is at the 2-hour mark to just get the feel for the room and decide if we want to, if we're not getting very far, take a break, or if we think we can power through, or if we're not getting far enough, we'll come back and do a December meeting. But if we feel like we can power through and get everything done, we will, and then we'll decide about our December meeting. Does that sound like a reasonable approach this evening? Okay. So having said that, is there any correction anyone or changes anyone would like to make to the agenda?
I have a question to agenda item 5D.
Yes.
OR amenities in 2020 budget. Are we talking about this year's budget or is it a typo and it's next year's budget?
No, it's this year's budget.
Okay.
So yeah, that'll be an interesting discussion. We need to, so the board has approved it. We need to decide this is not necessarily what we would have this isn't what we asked for, but there were just some communication issues on how we got to this stage. And so we just need to discuss what the group thinks we should do moving forward with this item. So that's what we'll be discussing.
Okay.
Thanks for the question. Okay, anybody want to make any other changes? The only other thing I'll add is that in the CAPS art project, we'll also talk about the art trail. That was in that item. So it's not just the updated piece, but also the art walk meeting that's a lot of us went to between now and our last meeting. Okay. With that, I don't see Justin. So let's move on to the next topic. And if he shows up, we'll come back to that topic. We did
And
say 5:45.
We have public comment, I think, Ryan.
Oh gosh, no, you're right. Thank you. So, and I think we also told him 5:45 or 5:50. So we're early. So thank you for correcting that. Next, we will move to public comment. So if you'd like to provide some comment, go ahead and raise your hand and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, Natasha. You should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, hi. I'm Natasha Flyer, 1640 Egret Way, Superior. I was hoping Justin would be here. I have to admit, but that's okay. And then let me say something about myself. In one form or another, I've been in wildlife conservation efforts for over 2 decades. And I'll be honest with you, I have really never been so absolutely enamored when it comes to this Saharia's property with such a tiny piece of land. I mean, I've worked across continents with large pieces of land, but just such a tiny piece of land. It's only 23 acres, as most of you know. And with the reservoir, depending on the level of the reservoir, it goes from 40 to 60. So you're talking roughly around 70 acres of land. So it's small. It's very, very small. It's one of the oldest, of course, agricultural reservoirs in Boulder County, founded back in 1882. And due to that age, it's had decades of ecological succession to form the unique habitats that they're now. It's given way as a result to exceptional biodiversity. And this really offers Superior, I think, a unique ecological opportunity. It has 4 ecosystems: aquatic, wetland, riparian, and probably by far the most important one is the playa ecosystem, and it mimics it. And that's a mudflats ecosystem. And the reason that is so important is many migratory birds, like for instance the American avocet, require those mudflats, and it's due to the rising and lowering levels of the reservoir to build nests and have fledglings and young. There have been over 90 species of birds observed, not to mention the numerous reptiles, amphibians, mammals. I've gone out there and seen a mink one day catch a fish, and the other week literally, hunt down a prairie dog. It's a migratory corridor. It's a Boulder County critical wildlife habitat in an urban setting, and the only one within city limits. Not just within, Superior city limits. There is no critical wildlife habitat in Boulder County within any city limit. Thus, it really can provide a needed venue, I personally think, for environmental education. It's really all there, just one giant, beautiful package of biodiversity on one little piece of land. And I think that's what's really caught my attention with this, as opposed to other conservation efforts. The only land that I really feel is similar to it, but really doesn't have quite the abundance of biodiversity is what is known as the Thorn Nature Experience. It's not even within Boulder city limits, it's east of Boulder city limits, actually. And this conserved land was a vision of a man, Dr. Ole Thorn. And this was back in 1954, which I think is pretty amazing, because in 1954, very few people thought of land conservation. And his mission was to build earth stewardship within communities by fostering an emotional connection to nature. And he did so by interrelating what I call the environmental trinity. Now, the environmental trinity is a name I've given to where is the triangular foundation for economic, human, and ecological welfare that's essential for sustaining the balance and health of the community. You need those three factors in every community. And I really truly hope that the town of Superior can be so visionary as this man was back in 1954, in understanding that we need this, and that Saharius with the Hodgkin-Harris Reservoir can offer this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I appreciate the comments. Anybody else want to make public comment tonight? Allison, do we have any other hands raised, or are we good?
We don't yet. If you hover over your name, you could raise your hand if you're looking for that option. We'll give you another second or two. Also, there's
Okay.
instructions in our chat on how to email the committee with any comments you might have later on.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on. So Justin is here. Justin, welcome. It's good to see you again. I wish we could have seen you in person with getting the CenturyLink deal wrapped up, but it's great to see you. And I know that's not the topic for tonight, but again, thanks for all your efforts and working with the town and getting that done. Yeah, it's still feels awesome to have that done. So appreciate it. So welcome.
You bet. Good to see y'all. Thanks for having me. And yeah, we're actually just getting close to wrapping up the conservation easement on the CenturyLink parcel. So with luck, that'll wrap up next week.
That's awesome. Great. Thanks. Yeah, so the reason I know that I think Tracy probably reached out, or Manager Magley, but we want to not sit back and relish the CenturyLink, but actually look at now the Zaharias property and what, we want to see what the options are. And it's why we wanted to bring you in to see what you thought about reaching out to the owner of the property. Now that we don't have an active development plan, we feel like it's a good time for us to be thinking about this and to reach out and just see if there's any interest from the owner in something other than a development plan for that parcel. Other people have anything they want to add, or not sure how we want to discuss this, but
Yeah, I can add some info, Ryan. So I think that Manager Magley really wanted it to be more formal and in public comment, and that's why we have you here today, Justin. However, the board did approve in their work session, as Ryan mentioned, that we can have you reach out. Our concerns in OSAC is our funding or lack thereof. And we have floated some ideas about, because given that dilemma, as well as potentially the owner's resistance to full acquisition by open space, we have floated ideas of maybe partial acquisition for open space instead of the whole thing, in order to best protect the Hodgkin-Harris Reservoir. And if you heard public comment from Natasha Flyer just now, she gave some great background on the reservoir and the ecosystem, and why it's really a priority to not only us in the Open Space Advisory Committee, but to citizens at large who really value that space. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you think that that's a potential option. or something that would work at all. And again, it's great to have you here. Thanks for all your work, and thanks for just honoring us with your time and attention again.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, glad to be here. And, it's an interesting thought about a partial acquisition because yeah, I think we all know it could be a big price tag. I think that the brochure from even a few years ago was around 6 million asking price. You all may have a more recent number you've heard. I'd be curious.
I think the last I heard was 7 million was what they wanted for the entire property.
Okay.
Good to see you, Justin.
Hey, yeah, good to see you too, Mark. So I don't know, I've been scratching my head. I did try to, I reached out to Boulder County because I think a partnership is pivotal here on this kind of project, given the, the big commitment the town has already made to the CenturyLink property. So, sometimes I think about these as, what's the likelihood of funding partners? How much money do we think we could pull together? And to some degree that informs the offer. And it's great to know that maybe there's an opportunity or some flexibility, at least from the town perspective, Tracy, about a partial acquisition. Because sometimes that's obviously a way to reduce the cost, and maybe it allows the Zaharias family to, still retain some property to develop, more of a hybrid concept. I'd be curious, I saw in some notes that Tracy had shared sounded like the town of Louisville may have had some interest, or at least the community of Louisville has some interest, and wondered if anybody here had more information about that, or what the opportunities might be to partner with Louisville on a purchase.
I don't have more information on their interest because we've never actually approached them about it, but anyone else feel free to jump in. I do know that their citizens have been extremely vocal about it for many reasons, not only the reservoir, but also there's a great opposition because of the location of that parcel and 88th Street, and any development of that would most certainly affect Monarch High School and the traffic on that road.
Makes sense.
So, Justin, just a couple other thoughts I had on this topic. When we were looking at the last proposal for the development on that property, there were 3 acres that were going to be gifted to the town as the ring around there as part of the development deal. And we all felt that this group decided that the setback we required, those 3 acres, didn't meet that requirement. So, it was close, but it wasn't, we said we wanted a minimum of 100 feet from all points, and it was 100 feet from most points, but at some points it was really close. And so that was really where we got gummed up on it. So there's that point, right? So if a new development does come forward from the same people, this will be something that will be on their minds, because they saw the developer saw the pushback already for that, the reservoir, and understands this. And it seems like they would be smart enough to remember those issues. So just wanted to add that was interesting. But the 3 acres wasn't, I think, from this group's perspective, enough, right? We'd like to have a little bit more room if we could. So maybe that bumps it up to 4 or 5 or even 6 acres of that parcel. And I had another thought about this, but I forgot, so I'll leave it.
And
Go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, Tracy. So that, Ryan, that's more that you're talking about if there is a development that the 3 acres set aside for parks or open space was at 3 acres was too small. So if something came back as a development, you'd like to see that big.
Well, and it wasn't so much the acreage, it was the setback from the high water line of where they drew it, right? 3 acres might work, but it was how the plans worked, where it just, at some points it didn't work, was the issue. However, I think, you know, we kind of think 100 feet is the absolute minimum. So, you know, my thought is even if they were willing to throw it in for development, if we could get a further setback, even though we would have to purchase, it seems like it would be a better outcome for the reservoir, at least in my opinion.
Hey, Ryan, I can't recall, did OSAC have an opinion one way or the other on the proximity of the pool that they were planning? Because I know that that was pretty close to the, you know, like southern edge of the development.
That was the sticking point, Mark, was the
yeah.
pool, because there's
Okay.
there's a little high water jog that came up, and then the pool was right there, and that was really the sticking point. There was a parking lot, but that one, I remember it got minimized quite a bit and pulled back, and there was a pretty good, at least, plan for the wastewater coming out of that parking lot. So, you know, others correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember the pool really being the area that was the issue. And the fact that we'd rather have 150 or 200 foot setback than 100. Now, Mark, another interesting part of this, and I don't know where we go with this, but, you know, for CenturyLink, if we did not get the partners, there was a plan on how we would fund the purchase from other things, right? We were going to borrow, you know, go into more debt from the town, not through bonds, but I think borrowing from one of the other funds. You know, now that most of that money has been matched, right? I think we're going to owe that fund maybe a year's worth of revenue out of the open space. But is that a possibility to borrow against if something were to come together?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are possibilities. We have, you know, one of the slush funds that the town has right now is a $10 million pool of money that has been amassed for purposes of purchasing our water rights through the Windy Gap firming project.
Mm-hmm.
So what the town has been planning on is, you know, we were going to buy all those water rights for the reservoir that's going to get built up by Loveland and Fort Collins. Because the town was able to participate in pooled financing with a bunch of other municipalities, instead of coming out of pocket $10 million to buy the water rights, we're going to be just making, you know, annual payments for 30 years or whatever it is, of, I don't know what it is, $600,000, something like that. So, you know, we do have a pool of money that, and I think that that's what we ended up doing with CenturyLink, is we borrowed against the Windy Gap firming money, closed the CenturyLink purchase, and then now Boulder County and Jeffco are, you know, contributing the $3.5 million towards the $15 million purchase price. So some of that money will get repaid back through that process. So there are, you know, available creative ways of, you know, coming up with money. You know, one of the things we talked about at, I think, our last meeting or the meeting before that, is the potential also to, you know, potentially leverage some of our water rights. Not saying that we want to do that, but, you know, it's a possibility. It's an asset that the town owns. We also own the town 15. I mean, that's something that we could sell, you know, if we wanted to. You know, so there's always ways of coming up with, you know, creative financing, and, you know, creative ways of, you know, finding some money. Now, obviously, that needs to be, I guess, balanced against the fact that, you know, we're building a community center, and that wasn't something that was originally anticipated, and now we're spending time and money on that. And, you know, we also have a lot of unfunded infrastructure projects and road projects and things like that you know, we could do. I mean, the other thing that we have available to us is, you know, we have the ability to raise our mill levies about 4 mills. Right now we're authorized to collect, I think, close to 12 mills. We're collecting 7.93 mills right now. And we could do that without going to the voters. We could actually just raise everybody's property taxes. I don't know if there's the political will to do that on the board, but it is an option. So kind of a long-winded answer to your question, Ryan, but I'm one of those people that I like to put deals together and get things done and then figure out how to make them work afterwards, rather than coming up with reasons why we can't do something.
Thanks, Mark, because what I was really after was, you know, if the funding really was a showstopper for Justin to start talking to the landowner or getting involved, and it doesn't sound, you know, from what I heard from you, that is definitely not the case, that there are options. Now, the board may not be willing to do that, but there are options.
So, I mean, another option is, you know, we could always go to the voters and say, hey, we've got a 0.3% sales tax. Let's make it 0.4.
I think the other thing that we
or do a
haven't talked
temporary
about,
one. I don't know.
we haven't talked to, Justin, when my first OSAC meeting was when you actually first presented to OSAC 2.5 years ago, I think. And I think one of the things that you'd brought up with one of the other communities you've worked with was around even having voter buy-in or resident buy-in for it too. We've never asked if, and I don't know, we wouldn't get a massive amount of money from our residents or even residents of Louisville, but I personally am not opposed of, if this is something that's so valuable to us as a town and we're trying to be creative with the financing, why aren't we looking at this as more of a grassroots way of asking people for money? People donate money to stuff all the time. And I think this could be a unique opportunity for us too.
Yeah, definitely. So you're talking about kind of grassroots fundraising.
I guess the other thing that I just wanted to just mention, Justin, so, you know, obviously right now there has been a development application that's come before the board. There's been numerous concept plans before that. And then actually, you know, a development application that came before the board. It was 100% residential. The property is zoned for commercial use. So that development application required a rezoning. The town board rejected that application for a number of different reasons. So now they're going back to the drawing board. And my understanding is, you know, they're planning on, you know, representing an application to the board at some point in the future. And I don't know what it's going to look like, but I would imagine that it would have, you know, a mix of commercial and residential, and then something hopefully less intense than what their previous application was. The $7 million that, you know, they've kind of thrown out there as to their purchase price. I mean, right, you know, right now the property is zoned for commercial use, and its value is, you know, predicated upon improving the land. But, you know, it was zoned in a way and at a time when they thought that property was going to be an interchange off of US 36. So they thought that, you know, a gas station, a hotel, a Quickie Mart, you know, those types of commercial uses would really make sense. And now that we don't have an interchange off of 36 there, the zoning may not necessarily make the same sense that it did when it was originally planned for an interchange. So, you know, the owner is in a bit of a quandary in terms of, you know, figuring out what the highest and best use of the property is. You know, obviously they don't want to just hold it forever. So I think that there is, you know, some middle ground here, but I definitely don't think that this is a $7 million property, and that's not in line with, you know, what the assessed rate would be or what appraisers would appraise the property at. And obviously the value of the property will be appraised in a way that is dependent on what the property is zoned for and, you know, what it could be used for. So, you know, whether it's commercial, residential, or open space will affect its value. So, you know, there's a lot of unknowns here. And, you know, even if they came back to the board with a project that was, you know, part commercial, part residential, that too would still require board approval and a rezoning. The only thing that would be if they came before us and said, okay, we're just going to put a gas station there. But I don't think that they want to.
But Mark, that's a good point though. If they came back commercially, they would be able to build essentially right up to the property line on the reservoir, correct? And there'd really be nothing to stop them from doing that unless there was some other endangered species or something like that. Is that correct? As far as
I mean, they would be able to do whatever, use by right allows them to do under RAC zoning. So like an office, they could do that. You know, there are setbacks and height restrictions and, you know, various restrictions within our town code and the Rock Creek PD that impose some limitations on it, but there are certain things that they could do that won't require board approval. But
Okay.
at least as far as I see things, I don't think that that's necessarily palatable to them from, you know, their perspective, from like an economic perspective. Like, I don't think they want to put an office there solely. Like, I think they really would like to do residential. And that's why they came before us with a 100% residential project that the previous board said was, you know, too dense, too much of an impact on 88th Street and on the reservoir, and, you know, not consistent and not subject to, you know, approving it for a rezoning.
Mark, are you sensing that the same developer may come forward then in a short period of time with a new proposal?
I think so. Yeah. My understanding is the owner of the property has worked with, and I forget the developer's name right now, but I think it's one of those deals where, you know, it's not the owner who's developing it, it's a developer who's under contract with the owner, and the closing of the property is contingent upon the approval of the development plan. So the developer is the one who's really taking the risk at this point, trying to get a deal done so they can, you know, close on a deal and then develop it, and then they get their return on the back end of the deal. Whereas the owner of the property has just owned the property for a long period of time and is going to get cashed out one way or the other, whether it's a deal with the town where we're purchasing it for open space purposes, or a deal with the developer where they're going to actually, you know, improve the property for residential, commercial, what have you. So, I mean, I think from the owner's perspective, he's just looking at, you know, dollars and cents and what the ultimate return is going to be. The developer has already sunk costs in the project because he's, you know, prepared development plans and gotten up to, you know, board approval, but the board didn't approve. So I don't think he wants to walk away from it at this point. He's trying to figure out, you know, how can he reformulate the project in a way that's going to make sense for him still, and, you know, would get board approval. But that's an unknown right now. Like, we don't know what the board thinks. We have a new board, and anytime you're banking on board approval of a rezoning, there's always the risk that the board says no.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's the same dynamic probably will make an appraisal really hard on the property, because the appraiser is going to look at highest and best use and be in some ways limited by the zoning, existing zoning, unless they make some extraordinary assumptions about a rezoning. So I guess, meaning that they would have to look at commercial, and it sounds like that may or may not be the highest and best use given.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, like, what happens in a situation where you're having an appraisal done on land that is zoned and the highest and best use is, you know, legally, okay, like legally you could put in an office park, but if there's nobody that's actually going to rent an office there and it won't make commercial sense, like, is that actually the proper grounds for an appraiser to kind of make those assumptions? Like, the zoning was predicated upon assumptions that didn't come to pass.
Yeah, it'll be challenging. What is the property currently marketed, or is it off the market?
I think they've had a sign up there for forever that's says it's for sale.
Is it that same Grubb Ellis group? Because I thought they got bought out by a larger company recently.
You know, when we did the 88th Street expansion, I don't know if that sign, if something happened to it when the path was put in, or if it's still up there. I don't know if somebody has seen it recently.
I went by there Monday and it wasn't up. I think
Okay.
it is off of 36 on the east end of that property. There's a sign, but not on 88th. It's an old sign. It looks like it's, at least the last time I saw it, it looked like it was falling down. So it might be old.
Hey, Mark, I have two questions for you. Justin can get this information from Matt Magley, but are there two owners to that parcel? I was always just understanding that it was the Zaharias family, and if that's not something you want to discuss during this meeting, that's fine too.
I'm not sure who actually owns what. I think you're right, Tracy, because I believe, and I think on the December 14th town board meeting, we'll be considering the acquisition of the right of way that we essentially are taking for purposes of the multi-use path along 88th. We previously considered that at a meeting or two ago, and the board rejected the proposal at that time. And I seem to recall at that point that there were two owners, but that should be in the board packet from a meeting or two ago. I could look that up and tell you who the owners are.
That's just interesting because we've never discussed that in OSAC before. And my other question is, in the history of open space acquisition in Superior, we have followed this kind of unwritten rule of maintaining a similar price per acre. And both Mark and Justin can correct me. I think it was something like 70,000 per acre. Is that something that we will be able to have some leniency on if we are able to acquire any portion of this parcel? Just because I don't see how it's feasible at that price per acre.
I mean, my personal opinion on, what the price per acre is whatever the buyer and seller are willing to agree on. So there's no hard and fast rule as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy, I looked the property up on the Boco Solutions and it does list two owners.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I actually went back through our records at the Conservation Fund, and it looked like some of my colleagues had worked a little bit on this back in 2006.
Okay.
When the fund and the town kind of first started a partnership arrangement. And I talked to two of them, and they couldn't quite remember what happened. It sounded like, if more than anything, the other projects at the time took precedent or priority. And so we have an old title commitment from 06 that also talks about two different owners. So that's about all I could find so far in the file, but there is a little bit of history there, which is helpful.
So we considered this 88th Street improvement project acquisition on October 12th. And so it's item 3D on the town agenda. And so we'll be rehearing that on the 14th of December. And the proposed agreement was with the Victor C. Thomas Family LLC and CLAD LLC, CLADD LLC. I don't know who owns either of those LLCs, but those are the property owners, at least as far as we're talking about, the portions of property that we were looking to acquire.
That matches what I saw on that Boco Solutions page. Okay.
Go ahead, Justin.
Sorry, just a clarification question. Is the town then moving forward to acquire a sliver of this property for the, I think you mentioned a trail?
Yeah, so we already built the trail, and we had a construction easement, and we don't need to necessarily go into all the details about it, but one way or the other, there is the need for the town to have a legal right to have the trail that it built on property that it currently doesn't own, whether that be by acquiring the land or leasing it, I guess was another way to do it. But my crystal ball says that the town should be acquiring it in the future, and probably in December. And the purchase price at that point in time was, at least what we looked at back in October, was $280,000 for 0.97 acres. And it's really just the along 88th Street right away. So just along the sidewalk.
Okay. So, someone at the town that I'm presuming is in touch with the owners about that arrangement.
Yep.
Great.
And Justin, I just want to clarify on behalf of Open Space that, we certainly don't want to make it unclear to you. We would love and be thrilled to have this entire parcel, the Zaharias parcel that we call it. We just know the challenges, so that's why we threw out the partial. And we've talked about it at length, and we've had a couple studies, which I think I shared with you, about the parcel. But in a perfect world, if we couldn't get the whole parcel, we ideally wanted something like a 300-foot setback, which of course a developer and a seller would never go for. But as much as we can take, with 300 being our goal and 100 from the reservoir high water mark being the absolute minimum. Anyone else jump in? But I'm just speaking on behalf of all of our bird experts who aren't able to speak today.
Yeah, I remember 300 feet was almost over half of the property. So that's why it was,
Unattainable.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right word. But so somewhere in that range was the goal. Okay, so Justin, is there anything you would need from us to get started? Or is this a good start?
This is really good. Great background and helpful to understand the different perspectives and funding possibilities that are out there. And so I think the next step for me would be to visit with Matt and see about just logistics of contacting the owners and just starting the conversation. I think at the same time, I'll be reaching out to our public partners like Louisville and the county to kind of gauge what their potential interests could be too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is certainly unique about this parcel, obviously, is Boulder County owns the reservoir, and they are well aware of the nesting birds and really the critical wildlife habitat that it is. So this isn't just a preserving a bunch of land that is used by prairie dogs and things like that. It's really a unique parcel, and there is the potential for it to be irreparably damaged if it is intensely developed.
Yeah, I saw a video of some of the bird life there at the reservoir and the shorelines. Really amazing.
Okay. Well, we don't want to keep you longer than we need to, Justin. If you feel like you know what the right steps are, and if nobody else has any questions, I think that we're good. So anybody have anything else? Okay, well, Justin, good luck. I think we should keep the same arrangement we did with CenturyLink. Tracy can be your point of contact from our committee. Tracy, if you're comfortable with that, you guys have a good working relationship, so that works for me. So I'd say let's keep that relationship and see what happens.
Sounds great. Thank you again, Justin. We are so
Thanks,
lucky
Justin.
to have your time.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all. Good to see you, and hope we can celebrate more publicly about CenturyLink here soon. Actually, by the way, is there a new name? I know you guys had some kind of vote.
So yeah, there is a name. It's the Coyote Ridge Open Space.
Ah, cool. Coyote Ridge.
Yep. So Mark, I love your smile here, because it was an interesting conversation, and as we get into trails and trailheads, my guess is we'll get into some more quirky names that are more drawing, but right now that's the name of the space. So we're excited to have a name.
Cool.
Yeah, we're excited for the opening when we can all get together again. So
yeah,
probably be the next time we see you in person. So looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you, and good luck. Have a good rest of the meeting.
Same to you, Justin.
Thanks,
Have
Justin.
a good night. Take care.
Bye.
Okay. Well, that was a good way to start. It's exciting. Okay, moving on to 5B, 2021 outreach programming. This is an update from Allison. So this is a standing up, or this is not a standing update, but it's an update item from our work plan that each year, the open space outreach that we do, we come up with what we think the programming should be at the end of the year. So I'll let Allison take it away.
Hi. I spoke with Ashley DeLop, our wildlife ecologist, and this whole past year, we've had to kind of revamp everything into being virtual, which is a little bit different for us because usually Ashley's conducting hikes and educational opportunities that are in person. So that being said, she has made a lot of presentations this year, I think about 7. We have another one that's coming out. That's the how to haze information for coyotes. And we started talking about next year, like we usually do, kind of ahead of this agenda item. And, what does next year look like? Right now, it may be still going virtual. So we started planning for a virtual opportunity. And what we came up with was a downloadable winter type scavenger hunt with tracks and, things that families or adults or kids could go out into the neighborhoods and parks and open spaces, look for these items, and then send pictures to Ashley. And then in February, we were thinking we'd give it a really long period of time for people to get this done, like over Christmas break into February. I think February 20th is the date we're looking at. It's a Saturday. And then she would do a virtual show and tell, which, is kind of different from what we've been doing. But that would kind of be the first one. And the reason that we went ahead and planned it without me talking to the group was that our deadline, it was basically today for getting things into our recreation guide for winter and spring, just this short early period of the year. So that's kind of our plan that we came up with. I'd be more than happy to add any ideas anybody has, and then talk about the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, Allison, from my point of view, you and Ashley always have good ideas. You always put together a good program. I mean, we provide a little bit of input, but it seems like the conversation between you two seems to drive more of this. And from my point of view, I don't see any different. So I love the creativity, and I look forward to going out with the kids and doing some hunting and, coming up next month.
Allison, you and I have briefly talked about it. I would love to be able to work to get this out into the schools, because I think we're going virtual starting Monday or Tuesday again. So I think this is going to be a very needed thing over our winter. So I'm happy to help. I know at least I have 2 contacts, one at Superior Elementary, one at El Dorado, and I can certainly work on Monarch K-8 as well.
And I love that. And as soon as I have that material, I'll make sure that you have it. The other thing is that after that February meeting, we were talking about if things are still going virtual and, we need to do something in this kind of nature again, that in February, we would drop a spring and summer downloadable for like the same type of thing, but it would be more the migration and some baby birds and some different things. So like the winter is one set with like go in the snow and see the paw prints and figure out what's out there. And then in the spring, we could do it again, give everybody a couple months to do their next hike, get in some photos and do the virtual show and tell through a Zoom meeting. And, just something different to do, but still getting that one-on-one that Ashley is so great at.
Sounds great to me. I have no objections. And actually, enthusiastically support it.
I'm impressed you came up with such creative ideas in a challenging time.
Well, we love to come up with new, fresh things, and we love to do things for the residents and get good feedback. And it's exciting to be able to do it a little bit differently. We've also kept all of those traditional things that she's done, like the identifying snakes, the insect identification, which was new this year, but kind of harkens to the bug hunt days. And so, you know, we've kept all of those presentations to hopefully put up on the website in our on our wildlife page. And then, you know, this more creative stuff can kind of come up because then we have that existing how to haze and bird identification type things that, you know, are available at any time to residents.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you need from us, Allison? Okay.
No, and feel free to shoot me an email if anybody has ideas of what could go in the scavenger hunt other than, you know, our normal like footprints and scat and, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, let me think about that. Okay, will do. Well, thank you. Okay, let's move on. So our next agenda item is the CAPS art project. So we had a subcommittee of people that were working with CAPS at looking at an art installation at the Ormond Roche Trailhead. From the correspondence and watching the CAPS meeting, they have chosen a piece. And so this was to have the committee bring us up to speed and see if there was anything we need to do around what is being planned for that amenity. So I think, Tracy, do you want to start on this one?
I can, and Rainer, you can jump in. Let me go back into my memory here. So they didn't choose a piece; they chose an artist who has a concept idea of what he would like to do. And I did send out information regarding this, but in essence, it is create a short trail, what I've been calling a mini trail, which goes down, goes to the sidewalk, from the sidewalk to the trail in the direction of southwest, and will kind of curve a little bit, it looked to me. And along that trail, that there would be, Rainer, I think it was 5 pieces of art in the shape of a circle, but they were going to ask the artist if he could kind of morph them a little bit so they had a little more depth and dimension to them. And those would be placed along the trail. So instead of having the art piece, as we had originally discussed in the subcommittee, being more on the western edge of the trailhead, he chose to put it more closer to McCaslin, which I actually appreciated, and I think Rainer did too, because it doesn't distract from the view then, and it's more of a draw into the trailhead. In addition to his concept idea, it flows really nicely with what our greater vision of the trailhead had been, which was to connect the existing trailhead, the kind of base, as we had been calling it, with the lower portion of the Shan property. And so we had wanted to create a staircase that connected the two, and this little mini trail would actually fit right next to our staircase, which had been in our plans and concept idea. So I think it's really interesting. The only big obstacle I see to it is funding. I do not see how, with, I think it was 30,000 was the budget. I don't see how that trail and his art can be created and installed for that price tag. But the next steps were that CAPS, I believe, Rainer, they were going to take it to the board and present it to the board. And I don't remember the date for that. Do you remember?
Yeah, the board will see it in the December 14 meeting. That's the plan. And quick follow up on your budget concerns. I have the same. The way I understand his proposal, I think is a wonderful proposal, kind of what he has out there, because it will be visible when you drive up McCaslin, and kind of, I think it will fit nicely in there. The way I understand it is that the 30,000 will be for the artwork and installation of the artwork and everything, and he is offering to make the trail on his cost, basically give it for free around those 5 elements. So I'm not an expert how much trails cost, but he may be underestimating what he has to pay for doing that. So that would be my only concern. But hey, it's his proposal, so it's his decision to do that. I don't know whether the town will tell him, well, our trails have to have certain requirements and which kind of may up the cost. So who knows where this will be going. In terms to your question, Ryan, what it means for OSAC, I think we should, once it's approved by the town board, we should look at how the connection to any at the trailheads, etc., works, whether you would have to think about any adjustments to our trail plans.
Okay. I mean, my concern, like when I saw it, it looked great. I went by there. I mean, it's pretty steep over there. It drops off pretty quick. So all the ADA compliance that are required, I don't know if that's required for a piece like this, because it's more art than connecting point A to point B. However, I believe that the ADA piece is pretty important, and it comes up almost any time we talk about trails and requirements. So, I mean, I know the town staff will be all over those, but I really hope to figure out how to make it work, because the concept looks amazing.
My hope is that the town board will be supportive of it, and maybe additional funding for the concept idea can be fronted by the town instead of just the artist, but who knows?
Well, and our thought was that if there does need to be some amount of earthwork over there to make the trail work, then maybe that would be the time to also design in the staircase and include that in any sort of construction that would also go along the new art path. And so we might be able to get one of our amenities along with some of the work that would need to happen. So I think that's just something for us to keep on our radar as we watch this project progress through its process.
Yeah, I think what the artist proposes fits nicely with the big plan for the OR amenities, having something happening from the trailhead, from the parking lot down to where the train tracks were. So I think this just could be a very nice combination between what OSAC wanted to have at some point anyway, something down there, to the new art piece.
Yeah, I was trying to think. We in our trails continuity doc, we have some details of construction costs. And there was that Trail F, which was the little piece from right by Town 15 on the east side of Town 15 that went from the lower trail up to, and I thought that was even like 20 grand to build that. Now it was all concrete, but when you start thinking that the trail might be 20 grand and the budget for the art is 30, it doesn't quite make sense. So, but we also don't know the details. So I hope we can figure it out and get that piece in there. Okay, well, Tracy, was there anything else you wanted, Tracy or Rainer, anything on that piece of the CAPS art project?
Yeah, just one more thing to Allison and Mark when it comes up, just that OSAC is supportive of it and that we do feel that it fits in our greater vision of that area.
Agreed.
Is anybody gonna plan on coming to the meeting to speak, to show up on the 14th?
From OSAC, you mean, Mark?
Yeah.
We hadn't, but would you like us to?
Can.
I mean, I always think it's anytime that we're doing something that touches on OSAC, I think it's even if it's another committee doing something, I think it's always great to have OSAC's perspective at the meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to communicate that OSAC is fully supportive of it, but I'm not as good as you guys.
Well, but it also, it's been a nice result of committees working together, right? It's really CAPS did a great job of reaching out and building a subcommittee with other groups and, talking and showing how the committees are working together by having us there is an added benefit. So I'm sure we can figure out how someone can be there. I'm not going to be going anywhere. So, if others, we'll figure it out. The other CAPS piece was that a good number of us went to the meeting that CAPS had on their art walk. I don't think it was quite called the art walk, but their trail art project that they're looking at for next year. I think maybe the more important thing would be to discuss that when we start getting into our work plan. You know, it was nice of CAPS to bring it up with ProStack and OSAC and saying, you know, you guys both own trails, you know, so we wanted you to all be involved. The email, I don't remember if the email went to everyone who went to the meeting. I think it went to all our committees asking if, you know, they wanted to see what was going to happen within our work plans if the art walk was something that we were going to put in our work plan. So we can talk about that in more detail when we get to the work plan, but I just wanted to bring up that that's another interesting conversation with CAPS, and this concept of this work or this art walk sounds really cool to me. So I'm excited to see what they can do, but we really need to look at our amount of work and decide if it makes sense for us to, you know, where, or if it even makes sense in our mission statement to be working on that. So that's the only other piece I wanted to add. Any other comments or discussion? Okay. So next, we're talking about the Orman Roach amenities in the 2020 budget. So what happened was in the budget meeting that the board had, at our last meeting, we brought up that we didn't see any amenities in for Orman Roach. Trustee Lasis brought it up and got the group to discuss it. It was approved in the meeting. What was unclear to me until afterwards is that it was approved in the 2020 budget, and it was approved to come from open space funds. Now and I think this is where, so what we had asked for when we asked for our budget was not to be from open space funds, it was to be from general fund. And the reason we were asking for that was because we knew that we were going to be thinking about Zaharias, and if there was anything we could do with Zaharias, we thought that we should be keeping all the funds we could just in case something could happen. So we're in this position now where it is approved for us to spend the small amount for Orman Roach amenities from the open space fund, and it needs to be procured or at least ordered in 2020, as far as I understand. So Allison, if I've misrepresented anything, please let me know. So, I mean, what we need to decide, we could push back and say, no, you know, I think really what happened is Sandy was, she understood these conversations from being here. And then when she resigned, we lost that piece when it went to the budget meetings. And so there was just a communication issue here, but it's the situation we're in. Now, having said this, I'm really torn because I do think that we should be saving the money. On the other hand, $30,000, I don't know if that would make or break a deal of being able to fund any sort of purchase or partial purchase at Zaharias. The other thing I'll add that, you know, from talking to Allison is that we saved about that much money out of the open space this year because the Superior, Youth Corps didn't happen that we normally would fund was actually right about this exact amount. So that would be one perspective of saying, okay, well, we saved the money and now we have an opportunity to spend it this year to help move ahead those amenities. You know, thinking about it, if we don't, we're probably waiting till 2022 because we'd have to go back into the 2021 budget process to get it approved. And so, you know, again, we'd be waiting at least another year before we'd be able to move it forward. So I think I'm leaning on, I think we should just do it. I think we've got approval and there's some ways to justify it. And I really don't think, depending, you know, kind of what Mark was saying, that if Zaharias something came up there, that we would figure out how to fund it. And when we're talking potentially a couple $1 million, is 30K going to make or break that deal? And I really don't think it will, but I'm curious of other perspectives on what you all think of this.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead with that as we agreed upon in, I guess, the last or the second to last meeting, because the trailhead really needs a few amenities. I'm going there often, and I think it's a little bit naked there, and I think it needs a little bit more of those, at least a few things to make it more usable for all the people who are starting there. And I agree with you, if we can do something with the Sunrise property, I mean, we need other funds. I mean, we need kind of access to much more money than 30,000. That wouldn't help us in any way to do anything.
I think we should move forward as well. I presented to the board budget meeting last year regarding this and got opposition from the board, which is why we waited again another year and took another stab at it. And we still could not get funding from the general fund for these amenities. So I just don't see our luck changing next year. And I think in order to get them, we're just going to need to move forward and pull it out of our fund. Unfortunately, there was, which I have really felt strongly against, because we need to be saving that money, but this is the situation we're in. There was a public comment of someone who's wondering what amenities we're looking at, and there's a long history with our amenities plan for the Ormond Roche Trailhead. So just giving a tiny bit of background, we are looking at small amenities only, and those include maybe a map station, refill for water bottles, possibly bike rack, mountain signage, small amenities in that regard.
Well, and if the group agrees that we shouldn't change course, the next part of this discussion was to go over a little bit of the discussions that Allison and I have started having on what we would actually start procuring. Because again, because it's 2020 and we're already mid-November, you know, we need to get moving on this. So I guess let's pause and see if there's any objection to moving forward. And if they're not, let's go through the list, and Allison and I will talk through what we're thinking on each one of these line items.
I don't object. I think we should just move forward. The money was already going to be spent on the youth course, so we didn't anticipate. And so it would have been nice to have that, but I agree with Tracy. I don't necessarily think it's going to go anywhere with future budgets in the general fund. So.
Okay.
Can I just chime in for a second? Obviously, once the election is certified, we're going to have a new board in 2021 with 2 new members, and how the previous board felt about certain things is not always necessarily how a different board feels about things. Just throwing that out there.
No, I appreciate it.
I'm not sure we're not going to ask next year, but I think, you know, we have this now.
We can ask for different things next year, which is our plan.
Right.
More expensive things.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not hearing any objections, so let's go through this small list and we'll talk about what we're thinking. The sign with the labeled mountain peaks. So what we have there is this was from the Aquarius Trailhead over in Louisville, that I always had loved seeing this when you come out there and you see the mountain ranges with this picture, a little bit of history, and then each one of the peaks labeled. This is what our thought is. Allison is trying to track down the source of this. So that's our current thought, is trying to track this one down and being able to build something similar to be able to put up there. So any concerns or objections to something that looks like this?
I love that as well. I have also seen the ones that are made out of metal, and they actually have the peaks like this and then the annotation below. I like those more, but I assume that they are more expensive and more difficult to find.
regardless of the format it takes, I love these as well. I stop at this every time I go to the Aquarius Trailhead. So.
Okay, good. I'm glad you know exactly where I'm talking about, Tracy. Yeah.
And some of those ones, I think I know what you're talking about, Tracy. Are they kind of bronze, like bronze pieces?
Okay. Then the second item was more just a desire to not mess up any trees up there. And since we won't be doing any construction, I don't see this one being an issue. Dog waste station is already done. Double waste bins are already done. Let's see, where did sunscreen and hand sanitizer? The hand sanitizer is done per Allison. So then we get into the signs detailing historical elements of the area. So we do have 2 signs there now already with the, not so much the historical piece of the old mining town, but the history behind Miss Orman and Miss Roche and how the names came about. We can discuss if we think that's good enough. The one trouble might be trying to pull together ideas and getting something commissioned in 7 weeks if we wanted to do extra. But we could always, yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Just a quick note about those signs from the Historical Commission. They are up and they're in a temporary spot. And the reason this was done was when other amenities come in, you know, they could be reorganized or rearranged or moved to complement those other things. So, you know, a lot of people are concerned about sign clutter. So, you know, just keeping that in mind that those can be moved and they're not in a permanent location.
That's helpful. And Ryan, in regards to the signs, that was just the intent. What exactly the Historical Commission is doing was the intent of that small amenity list.
So you would consider this done?
Yep.
Okay. And then maps and the information center, those 2 somewhat go hand in hand. These are the traditional, I guess, kiosk-like amenity you would see like we have at the Colton Trailhead that, you know, is made out of wood, and it has a big sign there with that holds pamphlets and has a map of the area and other alerts that are interesting. And so I know Allison is investigating getting one of these ready for us.
And the one thing, one note I had about this was that the one at the Colton Trailhead is rather large. And so because the footprint that, you know, at Orman Roche, you know, we may look into getting a smaller one and what everybody's thoughts were about that. But of course, this could, you know, have the plant information and the maps and some pamphlet type information on the kiosk. I was just thinking the one at Colton that it would be kind of modeled after is a little bit bigger than what we would have there.
I think you're right about that, Allison. I don't want it to go unasked. Do we have any flexibility with the design of that, or does BOCO require, hey, these are your options, basically pick from the catalog, that's the only choice?
Well, you know, I was going to look into that because I thought that those large stone pillars around the bottom potentially were just too big, and that if it could be a little plainer, a little slimmer, a little shorter in stature, you know, that if that's an option. I know that they have other types at other trailheads, and you know, it is nice to keep it consistent so that people know what they're looking for, and it matches the other signage that's up there. But I'm reaching out to them to see what kind of options there are for us.
Okay.
Okay, and then working down the refill station for water bottles. Allison, did you have a chance to get any sort of cost estimate on this? I mean, our thought was that this was going to be way more than $30,000 to bring water into the trailhead, but we weren't sure.
Well, I guess you know, all things being equal, I mean, if we wanted to try to take the entire amount to try to do that, that's an option. Or if the group wanted to say, this is our maximum, we would want to put towards this, that might help me a little bit because, you know, there are all these other things on the list. Some of them are done. Does the group have a desire to prioritize this above everything else, or, you know, what's the appetite?
Do you have an idea on an estimate at all? I know Patrick had said that the sleeve was there so that it wouldn't be like moving, you know, heaven in order to get it to happen.
There is a sleeve there, but, you know, if it were to go up by the trailhead, it would have to run from McCaslin and be trenched in all the way up to the, basically to the gate area. And, you know, I think that that trenching alone could be 15 to 20,000 potentially, with the pipe. You know, and since this was really unexpected, I don't have a quote handy. And my thought was it was too much if the other things, you know, just the peak sign and the art of, you know, getting that done could take a considerable amount. I'm not sure. And the kiosk.
I mean, if we have to pick between the two, my opinion is to push the refill station to a later ask and get the other items in this year. That would be my preference, but other opinions?
I agree with Ryan.
I agree. I like the kiosk and the Mountain Peak sign. Both are very nice additions, without a lot of expense associated with getting water there.
I would put the water as well at the lower priority.
Not to
Okay.
not to totally play devil's advocate. I'd be willing to put money down that Joel would actually do it the opposite, that he would want the water at the refill station, because he's talked about that a lot. And are there any in that entire loop that you can do, which I don't know the name of it, I can't remember, but is there any opportunity for a water refill, or is it once you're out there, you're out there?
There's not.
So
even Colton, you know, that has a bathroom is
right.
It's a vault bathroom, you know, so we really don't have potable water in any of these locations.
I don't think we're saying let's not ever do it. I think people, well, I don't know. Without doing a survey, we'll never know, but I think people would appreciate more the map and the signs and the kiosk than the water. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. The water will be super, you know, like at Chautauqua where they have it, it's really a nice feature to be able to fill up your water bottle there. But
I also think right now with COVID, I want to say all of our water fountains are closed. I mean,
well, that's a good point. Yeah, that just pushes me over the edge, right? It doesn't mean we don't want to do it. It just means it's not this time. At least that's my view.
I agree. And I believe it's critical. I mean, it's absolutely essential for that trailhead. But when we began creating this, we really tried to block it into things that were affordable and small, in a small budget. And that's why we created this first section. And I think it turns out that water is not affordable for this small budget.
So Mark, that's probably going to be an ask for 2021, just saying.
Hey, I mean, hopefully then we'll be using our drinking fountains again.
And then really the last piece here is a bike rack. And Allison, the only question there is, would you like Joel to chime in on what he thinks we should put there, or do we have enough information from what's at the Colton Trailhead?
wasn't there also a bike fix-it station? I would love him to have input on both of those things. Oh, that's...
It was down here, but maybe there's room. Maybe we put I mean, those two things could go together.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we take the action item to have Joel make a recommendation on what he thinks what would work there?
Because
I'll-
if it's, yeah, I mean, if we could get something that kind of works together in that manner, that would be really nice.
Allison, I'm just going to remind you of our vision again of pulling history and making the area unique. Not that other places in Boco aren't, but I think there's a lot of potential with this item that we could do something special.
Yeah. Are you thinking like art, like bike rack with a unique style, or what are
Yeah,
or
I can send you.
maintenance station with a unique style?
Yeah, I can send you the PowerPoint again, but we had originally put together a bunch of photos of unique bike racks and bike stations that exist that would add a little bit of interest to the area instead of just utilitarian.
Or maybe even if Joel has that, if since he's our kind of our bike expert on our team.
Yeah, I mean, Tracy, do you and Joel want to coordinate and pitch something to Allison?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Because I can
Just-
order anything that the group is happy with.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, and then the last piece here was scenic overlook area. I don't recall what that meant to purchase or to build.
It was the photos and ideas that we had come up with were designating kind of a space to enjoy that view with a bench. That's a little bit different now because Sean was actually purchasing from Boco a bench to put in that area, but I don't know the exact area that that's getting put. But it was essentially just designating a location that people could
Okay.
sit and rest and enjoy. So I don't want to write that one off, but I wonder if we need to put it on hold, maybe. I'm not sure.
It's just the fact that it's not clearly defined makes it hard to get it executed this year.
Yeah.
Is my only concern. But I also think the bench and then the art path from CAPS somewhat, I mean, I think we also thought about it being an area with an art piece there that you
Yes.
would take pictures in front of. So it feels
Yes.
like it's somewhat covered. So it doesn't, I think if everyone's okay, I think we just say this is something we want to maintain there, but not something we need to action to purchase this year. Does
Yeah,
that seem
I would
fair?
drag it. I would just put a postpone until 2021 and see how things transpire with the art with Sean's bench, and we can revisit it.
Okay. Okay. Well, Allison, we have the pieces. So I think we're good.
And I'll still definitely look into the water bottle filling station. I just think it's going to be at a high end cost.
Okay. Thank you.
And maybe they're on sale right now because nobody's buying water fountains because of COVID. I'm not
That's a good
really
idea.
joking.
Yeah.
Can't hurt to
Yeah.
ask just to find out what they cost now.
Yeah. I mean, the installation is going to be the majority of the expense, but if we know we're going to do it and we have it, then, I mean, it somewhat commits us to doing it in the future, but maybe that's a good thing.
Well, it's also the ground work and
Mhm.
the time of year. So, just trying to work around some of that.
Yep. Understood. Okay. Everyone comfortable with this one? All right. Well, we are making excellent progress. So thank you all. I've got these notes saved, Kate, so I'll send them. Everything I have here is saved, so I'll send it to you. The next agenda item is not that document, but it is this document. Okay, trail ranking finalization recommendation. So this one should go fairly quick. We've been working now for 4 or 5 months on our trail ranking. The last bit that we had to talk about 2 meetings ago was that we had some ties and it created some issues with ProStack. We talked about how we were going to fix it. We changed our ranking slightly. We sent it over to ProStack. They accepted those changes, and at their last meeting, they voted to accept the trail ranking. So this one is potentially as easy as just voting or making a recommendation and voting, or we can review the results again. I'm happy to do the latter. I'm somewhat tired of looking at that document, but if people would like to, I'm happy to. You know, for our new members, Cara and Tracy, you know, because this process was pretty wrapped up before you joined, I don't want to really rehash the whole process, but I think I sent the file out to you to see what it looked like and how we went about ranking it and coming up with a combined ranking between OSAC and ProStack.
Yes, had a chance to look through that. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I say we make a recommendation. Kate, I had the recommendation written and I forgot where it was. It's in the pre-read, right?
I think so.
Yeah, let me, I just got to find it here. Yeah, here we go.
Oh, I was going to race you.
I've got it here.
Okay.
Okay, so because we knew this was coming, I have already written the recommendation, so we don't need to wordsmith it here, but this is the recommendation I propose, and we can change any wording, but OSAC recommends the town board accept the 2020 combined OSAC ProStack Town of Superior trail ranking document. Any discussion, or would anyone like any word changing in this recommendation? Okay. Having said that, everybody understands. Any other discussion? Okay, so again, I'll reread the recommendation. OSAC recommends the town board accept the 2020 combined OSAC ProStack Town of Superior trail ranking document. Would someone?
I second that.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, I'm presenting so I can't see, but anyone opposed, raise your hand. Okay, so it passes unanimously. Yay, we're done. Okay, we are flying. Okay, 5F, OSAC ProSAC merger, all about the trail. So I probably shouldn't have called this merger. I probably should have called it separation of duties. This started as OSAC ProStack merger.
Stop giving people PTSD, Ryan.
I know, I'm really sorry about that. When I saw that, you know, when you're writing an agenda, you're just going so fast, but when I saw it, it gave me a little bit of PTSD also. So it's not a merger. So just to give everyone history, hopefully, I don't know if you've all been able to go watch it, but at the work session, Trustee Shaw brought up, you know, kind of his thoughts on how we could separate out the duties, with the goal being that we would eliminate this overlap that causes us and town staff and the board so much grief. And with the driving concepts that CenturyLink has done, and so while we can still work on some acquisition pieces, the long-term future of OSAC isn't going to be so much in acquisition, but in other things, much like Boulder County is in terms of switching to more conservation and wildlife and those kind of things on those spaces rather than acquisition. And also the other big thing is 1500 Colton coming online, and ProStack having a strong desire that they want to be very involved in the programming aspect of what's going to happen there. So if you hadn't seen it, this is what the document looks like that Trustee Shaw had presented. You know, when I looked at this, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at it, but when you look on the OSAC side, I don't know that, not much really changes when you look at this from our work plan, except for where he drew these trails and trailheads in open space. There's, those, both of those are pretty close to the line. And this to me is the big piece that we need to figure out. He's also got here wayfinding on open space trails. The reality of it is most of those open space trails are Boulder County, and that would be something that, we could work with Boulder County, but we wouldn't necessarily have a whole lot of, well, I should say that we haven't put open space wayfinding on our work plans in the past. We could decide to, but we hadn't really. We've talked about, I recall talking about wayfinding being more of an interior trail project rather than an open space type of project. So, and really, all I want to bring up here is that right now where this sits is that I'm working with Todd from ProStack to try to figure out these trails, how to separate this, because even some of the discussion was that, well, there's going to be trails, but OSAC and ProStack probably still need to coordinate. And I really just don't, neither Todd or I really like that statement because it's vague and it's going to get back to kind of the similar situations we're in. So we, both of us agree, we'd like to have a really clear line in the sand on where we would, how we would look at trails. So we looked at various things well, I've started to look at it. I was hoping I would have a meeting with Todd before today, but I wasn't able to. And so, one way we looked at this was we had some maps from Allison on the agriculture plan that she puts together for landscaping and whatnot. And there's definitely areas of town that are more considered manicured. So there's sod and there's sidewalks and it's irrigated. And then there's other areas that are more natural open space. So we were thinking, maybe you just break it up by those kind of areas. But what I gathered from looking at that was some of that is difficult. And so the other way I looked at this is I took our trail ranking map and I color coded it. And I said that, green on here would be OSAC because it's it's getting people from town to the open space, right? It's on the exterior of town and it's either in open space or it's getting you to open space. And then yellow on here was things that I felt was clearly in ProStack's purview. So all of these up here are downtown, like 8 is all in parks 1 and 2, and all these trails up here in 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. This was all getting people interior into downtown Superior. Having looking at it though, the ones that I marked purple was, it's just not so clear what it should be, right? So 20, 21, 22 over here along McCaslin, those trails are definitely interior to Superior, but those trails don't make a whole lot of sense without the 22 trail, without the trail along McCaslin having these little offshoots. And so these were the ones to me that were somewhat up in the air that Todd and I felt needed to work through. There's trails on Zaharias, but that's private property now. And if and when there's ever a development, there'll be trail plans that come in within that. And the board in that case will ask us to review whatever piece they feel we should in the property. So that one I wasn't so worried about. And then the only other one is this concept of trying to go up Rock Creek. I'm sorry, that's Coal Creek, isn't it? Coal Creek from Town Hall over to where we get into the open space, right? That's, it is kind of through the middle of town, but it's also along the creek and trying to get people, out into the open space. So I bring all this up just to get your input because I will be talking to Todd as soon as I can about ideas we have on how we could split out the work on the trail. So definitely open to, I mean, it could be just as simple as let's look at this map and decide, but this map also isn't the, other things could come up in terms of trails. And so then what do we do in those situations? So I'd love to hear what y'all think.
I like your thought process of anything that connects open space to town is open space purview, and I like this map. I think you've done a good job on it.
I guess that.
Oh, go ahead, Rena.
Sorry, I guess
No,
that
no.
the trails have been the biggest sticking point where the biggest overlap between the two committees has been in the past. So by really trying to separate and having no overlap, I think most of the issues would be taken care of.
Well, and it really came to a head for the board on that Autry Park Trail that we spent a good amount of time on at a meeting. Remember, we came up with an alignment, and then also ProStack was asked the same question and came up with a completely different alignment. And then everybody's just sort of stuck, right? How do you go forward, right? So it just creates so much work. And you've even seen with the trail rankings, how many meetings we've had to delay this because there was a communication issue on how we were combining rankings. And so, yes, Rainer, I completely agree. If we can figure this out, I think that most of the duplicate work is figured out. Kate, you had something to offer?
Not a lot, but I agree. I think this is the only way to make it happen in my head, unless one of us just takes on all the trails, but then that gets into, there's just going to be different overlapping work at that point in time. So I think this really is the best way to look at it. And I do agree that the purple trails are a little wonky and a little bizarre. For me, I see the one that is the Coal Creek that goes along the creek. Because it's going, yes, it's going from town, but going into open space. To me, that would be more of something that would be ours, whereas the property or the trail on Zaharias, even though I don't really know where I stand on that one. Actually, I was gonna say something, but I don't really know.
But we also don't know what a development plan will look like there.
Right.
And it's not like it's open space right now. It's not that it's open space and there's going to be trails on there, right? We don't even we only had this on our map because we thought that it was going to get developed and we thought we should be thinking about the trails. But right now, we could almost argue that this doesn't even belong on a map right now because there's no work to be done in terms of a trail here.
And I think the only other thing I was going to say was just that what if this is what we decide, then there is the potential for future trails to join, the map, to get on the map. So just being able to have it clearly defined that we take the one type, they take the other type, so that there's not in the future some sort of disagreement on what who's going to end up managing that trail.
My only thought there is we might need to designate a map owner, that if new ideas do come up, whose responsibility is it to update the map and to color code it? That's maybe where there needs to be an OSAC ProStack leadership meeting once a year, maybe, if needed, kind of thing. I also think we could figure that out as it goes. I mean, right now, the only concern would be that Todd and I are very focused on this right now. There will come a time in the future where leadership in both groups won't have this history and won't have thought about it nearly as much as we have trying to figure this separation out. So that's why we want to try to make the rules really clear in whatever we do.
Can I ask a question, Ryan?
Yeah, sure, Mark. Go ahead.
So as I understand kind of this division of responsibility, who has authority over the trails on the Coyote Ridge open space?
That's open space. OSAC does.
That would be
And-
my impression as well, but
Well, and this is where, this is my thought, but from initial conversations with Todd, he agrees. Even though we even talked about it from this angle that, part of that land over there was purchased recently, but the other part was already town. And ProStack had already worked on doing some trail work within the existing town part of that Coyote Ridge Trail. But he agreed when I talked to him that, that's all open space and that all falls into open space. I mean, the conversations actually are very practical that I'm having with ProStack. So I feel like we're going to land on a really good solution, but
I just think of
But-
all town trails and all town trails that we could possibly have. I mean, we have a number of them which are already, awesome, and we're very fortunate to have access to all the BOCO open space. But the planning for the Coyote Ridge Trail, whatever it's going to be, up on the Coyote Ridge Open Space Trail, or the Traily McTrail Face Trail, or whatever we decide to call it, is an opportunity to really deliver a highly used, like remarkable trail that takes advantage of, the vantage of,
Yep.
The view. So I think it's one of the kind of coolest things for us to think about as a town over the next, year or so, now that, we didn't have on our radar a year or two ago.
So what you'll see when we get into our work plan discussion is exactly that, and actually several ideas around how we would, what the future of doing this trail ranking even is for this group. And that is one of the big ones that we put onto the work plan, is starting to plan out what the Coyote Ridge open space trail and trailhead system would look like. And again, from talking to ProStack, they agree that that's in this division, that makes sense for that to be an OSAC type of work plan. So if everyone's good with the trails, I mean, I'll just keep having the conversation with Todd, and we'll solidify what our position is and then figure out the next step. So once we do that, my guess is we'll have some work to do earlier in the next year to almost redefine our charter. ProStack would most likely change their name, because the open space trails of ProStack, right, really don't apply to their purview anymore. And if they're changing, it's a great opportunity. Yeah.
Brian, can I make
yeah.
one comment on the trails? I really
Yeah.
do appreciate the work that you and Todd are doing and the patience that the board is having regarding this, because I think that will clearly separate in it, like Kate had mentioned, will be one of the best things to happen to these committees for the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Tracy, you have the longer history, like myself and Joel on this. So agreed. One thing we probably would do would be to, we just talked about the programming for next year. One of big OSAC's ProStack's big charters will be the programming, the Parks and Rec programming. So it made sense for this open space programming to switch to them, just because if they're taking over programming, this one sliver of programming being an OSAC has always, it's okay. But I think that if they're focused on programming, that I think that they would have a better chance of having more input than we do. I mean, we think about this, but it's never really in our focus. And so we maybe have some ideas, but it really falls on Allison and Ashley to figure this out every year. So that was something else we discussed. But I also think it's a real opportunity for us to look at our mission and maybe start to morph it a little bit towards, open space. I alluded to this, but the open space, preserving the open space rather than acquiring the open space. And it's even a chance to maybe even put more of a wildlife slant into our mission. And slant is the wrong word, but maybe we put wildlife in our name somehow to really solidify that we are the committee that's trying to figure out and help with wildlife issues. I mean, we sort of have taken that on, That wasn't ever the original charter, but we've morphed it to that, but this would be in the next step. So there's a lot of work to come on this, but like I said, for Todd and I to, we obviously will come up with the ideas and we'll bring it back to the group to make sure everybody's on board with how we think we'll split the trails. But I wanted to just at least start with how we're approaching this to see if people had other ideas. So, if you see this and have our discussion and you noodle it and say, gosh, maybe there's a different way to do this, please bring it up, because, these things are hard to do. I mean, we can figure it out, but there's a lot of smart people involved that can help us. So if you think of other ways that maybe we could slice this, let me know.
One quick question I have, Ryan, and if this isn't the time, that's okay too, is just how does the maintenance then fall and the budgeting for the maintenance then fall for this separated trail concept?
I don't know if it changes, but that's a good question. I don't know, right? Today, I don't know when there's a rainstorm and there's interior trails that need some maintenance. Does that come out of open space? I just don't know. And I don't think it does, but let's think about that.
Really quick, there is a trail maintenance line in the open space budget. So indeed, if there was like a water bar or some kind of maintenance item that was within that budget, then it would come out of open space trail maintenance for open space trail.
So, but Allison, in that, what defines an open space trail versus a non-open space trail?
Well, typically it would be like a manicured area versus a non-manicured area.
Okay.
So if it's native, no irrigation, in the open space class on our class map, we have a class map where different budgets and different buckets of money basically pay for different areas. And so there's areas that are classified as open space. And those were those maps that I showed, talked to you about, that kind of helped to clarify some of that language that we were talking about.
Okay.
As far as what's open space, what's more of a recreational park area versus, visual open space like a median or something like that.
Sure. So it sounds like the budgeting wouldn't change, right? That there would still be those classifications, and that open space fund would pay for one and other funds would pay for the other, which seems reasonable and seems to be consistent with our definition here. Okay. Any other questions? I mean, this one is going to be ongoing probably into Q1 or even Q2 of next year, of trying to get all this figured out.
One more question,
so,
Ryan. What's the timeline for the renaming? I didn't catch that.
Well, so Todd and I need to come up with what we think the best proposal is for the trails. And then after that, then it'll go into a formal process of the charter or the resolutions for each committee being looked at. And along with that would be the naming. So I think that all gets wrapped up together when we're done with this part. I think that might need to involve Manager Magley to get going on all of that. So my guess is that would be early next year. Now, I'd like to get it done early next year because it does somewhat impact our work plan for next year. So at this point, we'll just take that into consideration as we work through the work plan. Okay, any other questions? Thank you. I'm just so y'all know, I'm really excited about this. I'm happy. I really think the right answer is to separate duties, but keep our committees separate. I really believe we have a lot of valuable work. I think that expanding a wildlife program and really learning from Boulder County on how they're planning about managing open space rather than just purchasing. I just, in a combined group, I just don't know how we get all that done. So I'm encouraged. Okay, so speaking of that, it is time to get to the work plan. So we are actually about 10 minutes ahead of our schedule. You know, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. I really think we could push through and get this done in a half an hour. Does anybody not want to push through and get all the work done today? I mean, we may get bogged down in the work plan and decide that we want to think about some things and still need to come back. So that may happen, but.
So why don't we do, I can be a timekeeper, and so because we're 10 minutes ahead, if people are okay with it, why don't we at like 2:45 evaluate where we are, and if we're still okay moving forward, we can do so.
Okay. I agree.
Okay.
Okay. So Kate did a good amount of pre-work on the work plan, working through some things that we think we could cut, things that we should add, we had some other thoughts on a new column that we might add to our work plan. This is this estimated time needed. We're thinking that this might be a valuable tool as we put together a work plan, because, you know, we essentially have right now 12 meetings a year at 2 hours a meeting. So we have 24 hours worth of work. I mean, obviously our meetings don't always go 2 hours, but you know, if we know we have 24 hours worth of work, but we put together a work plan with 50 hours of work, well, we either need to decide to have 2 meetings a month, or we just put way too much work on our work plan. So we're going to try to shell this in and see how it goes. So I think what we should do is just go down on each one and see what comments people have and just start working through it. I plan to take comments right on this document, and then we'll wrap that up. So, okay, I'll zoom in here to try to make the screen a little bit bigger. You all should have a copy of this also, but holding leadership.
Ryan.
Yeah.
What's the timeline on the work plan, when it's supposed to be finished?
Normally, we like to get it done at the end of this year and have it ready for the board to look at early next year and approve. I don't know exactly when it will go on their agendas. I mean, these normally get approved about, I think Allison and I were looking at this, usually later in Q1. There were some years that ours went out till like April or May because there were some changes that needed to happen, and we had to rework the work plan after a few iterations. So we don't necessarily have to have it done this year, you know, at the end of this year. And we might decide that because of we're not sure of the potential charter changes, that we want to get it outlined, but maybe not have it completely done. On the other hand, we also have the right to redo our, you know, if we're changing the OSAC charter, we have the right to rework our work plan also at that time, is something I'll add. Does that help?
Well, if you don't have a December meeting, does it mean we have to get this done today?
Yeah. Well, we'd like to have it mostly done today.
And I think we did that last year. And I think there was some editing that happened between November and the January meeting. And then in January, I think we made our recommendation to the board that this is our finalized work plan. And yes, I don't know if anybody else remembers it that way, but I don't think we didn't make a recommendation in December. We made it in January, and that seemed to be okay.
Yeah, we did a majority of the work. There were a few little things we wanted to look into, but we were okay with individuals doing that, bringing it back around in January for a quick discussion and then an approval. I think that would be the plan here if we feel like we've gotten far enough. If we feel like we haven't, we could either decide to spend more work on it early in Q1, or we could decide to do it in December. I could go either way. We don't want to rush it, right? That's not the goal. So let's dig in and see how it goes. Okay, So the first line item is to hold leadership elections and to commit annual work distribution. This one is white because this is necessary and really not something we can remove from our work plan. So I think this one's fairly straightforward, but I'll pause for questions. Okay. The second item was to reevaluate marketing for community outreach events and programs and superior properties. If I remember right, this was a new one we added last year. We really felt that we could do a better job of promoting all things open space, and we had seen some ideas that CAPS had started with a postcard that they were sending out to residents with the dates and events and important websites and whatnot. We really didn't get to it this year. COVID put a stop to all of our events, and so this one, we thought about it and we started, but then it came to a stop. So I think we should keep this, but Kate, I think the questions here were community outreach for events and programs and superior properties. The superior properties of this was a little unclear what this means in terms of outreach or marketing for community outreach.
Yeah, properties is a strange word, but we had also put that on there because we were going to try to market the new Ormond Roche trailhead to get community support behind it, because if we had more community support, then
Right.
we'd have better support to get more amenities placed on it.
Okay, so maybe we reword that. Outreach events and programs and like open space amenities.
Amenities,
better?
parcels, open space parcels, trails.
But what are we gonna market for parcels? I mean, if we put a
Yeah.
postcard out in January, what does that mean?
I shouldn't say parcels, spaces like CenturyLink, you know, if we're going to do trails on that. But all that being said, is it needed anymore? Because we're proceeding with the amenities. I mean, we already know that there's great desire to use that trailhead, and we're using our own money to put more amenities on it, and we'll see what the future is regarding amenities. Do you know what I mean? Like the only reason to do it for Ormond Roche was because we didn't want to use the open space budget, and so we wanted the town to really rally behind that trailhead.
Right. I mean, I think that we can leave it with events and I mean, I like the idea that if there's something coming up on an open space amenity that we should be marketing it. So I don't want to limit ourselves just to the events and programs.
I also like the idea of just marketing, just reminding people, yeah, we're not a big town. We don't have a lot of properties, but I like the idea of just even having a focused item that that brings this back to the attention to people that, you know, if you go to Colton Trailhead all the time, you know, try our Ormond Roche Trailhead as well. And then we're going to have the CenturyLink, that it just kind of gives us a different chance to highlight, kind of like how the Historical Commission always has their newsletter. That's, you know, there's always something new in that. I do think that we have new people moving into our town all the time that want to know what's going on. And so, you know, I run under the assumption often that I know about it, so everybody knows about it, but that's not true.
That's a nice perspective, Kate. I have one question for you, Ryan. You said that we were taking programming off and that was going to ProStack. What about our National Trails Day?
Nope.
Okay.
That, to me, that wasn't programming. That was, I mean, we could talk about that, but when I talked about that with Todd, that wasn't brought up. And to me, that would be a pretty big work plan addition that they would need to add. And they're trying to get focused on 1500 Colton and that type of programming. So we didn't go there. And so I'm keeping it on the list.
Great.
I mean, we could, to be determined if we wanted to discuss that more. Okay, is everyone okay with an open space amenities? I think it works. Okay. I'd like to remove meet with ProStack to coordinate work for 2020. I mean, this is somewhat, maybe there's an asterisk here because there's an assumption here that we get all this done. But, you know, if we do it right, we shouldn't have to meet to coordinate for next year. Obviously, and remember, you know, especially for our new members and for everyone, you know, we put together this work plan, but we serve at the pleasure of the board. And if they need us to go do something, they will ask us to go do it. And we always do. So let's say we took this out, but then something critical came up, you know, we would go work on it with ProStack. You know, the other little piece there that I've been talking with Todd, though, that if there is something where we need to work together, we agreed that we would figure out how to schedule that at one of our meetings rather than trying to do leadership meetings or meetings as subcommittees or something, but just figuring out a way to fit it into the current meeting schedules just for the efficiency that gains us, right? Anytime we don't do that, it always takes us 2 or 3 meetings before we can get everything worked out. So that's just an aside. Okay, plan and schedule National Trails Day event. So this event usually is the first weekend of June. I can't see not doing this. It's been growing and it's been a good success for us. And it's, you know, I guess the only decision there would be, do we not want to do it? I'm not in favor of that, but if others wanted to bring that up, we could.
And we didn't have it last year, so it's pretty much planned and ready to launch if we're able to do it this year. So
Yeah, that's a good point, Kate. The logistics, I mean, Allison will have to do more to reschedule everything, but we can reuse the program that we had for 2019. So the logistics of it should be pretty simple. And actually, I've taken enough notes from the previous years of who to reach out to and everything, so it's getting to be pretty easy to schedule. Okay. Sponsor National Day of Service cleanup programming. What happened where we got to this one last year was that, you know, we were doing the National Day of Service in the fall. And what we felt was that it kind of became an afterthought, right? We were working on other things and then that came around and then we'd put out a notification and, you know, we'd get 8 families in Superior that would go do the cleanup. And we felt that, you know, if we're going to do this, let's figure out how to make it grow and be more successful than what we were doing. And so this was really just starting to think about how would we think about this maybe all year round as opposed to that one time that it comes up in the fall. I forget exactly when it was. Because we never even got off the ground with this due to COVID, I'd like to at least try it again and see what we can come up with. But I'm open to if other people do not want to do this. Okay. Review the fund balances and other financial issues applicable to OSAC. I would like to do this one. This one is a lot of work to go and pull all the data together and then come back and present it. I finally feel like I figured it all out and how to find the data last year. And with such a big change to CenturyLink, I think that understanding this is going to be pretty important for us for any decisions that we make going forward. You know, we think that there's going to be some growth of the fund every year, but and we think we know about what that is, but just having it written down and having something that we can go reference, I think is super important. Okay, the next one, evaluate outreach and marketing opportunities, dog education, Rocky Flats, Rocky Mountain Greenway, other things. So it's yellow because it's saying, is this the same as question number 2? And do we want to have it, or what do we want to have at each event? And how do we want to get the word out? Kate, do you remember why we were kind of questioning about this one.
Yeah, we were just talking about, is there an opportunity to combine number 2, priority 2 and priority 7 under this one? Just again, to cut down where on the number of items we have in Q1, because it always feels very heavy.
I
And
see this one as us educating the community and tracking what is happening in the community. Do you see it? And I see number 2 as marketing. So postcards, flyers, etc. Do you see it differently?
What I remember of this one is we really decide that when we go to our outreach events, what collateral do we want to have ready at those events, right? And we've done
Okay.
so many things in the past. We've had trail signs, we've had our maps, we have open space maps, we've had talking papers on e-bikes and Rocky Flats, and you know, it's those kind of things. And looking at it this way, I do feel like it's somewhat different, because one is marketing the events and the other one is what are we going to actually talk about at those events. But doing them at the same time does make sense. So it does. Do you agree? It does feel like it's, let's plan out our outreach events, and it includes marketing and collateral is really one way to look at this.
Yeah, sounds like you can combine them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it would be more efficient to look at it that way. So any objection? We'll have to come up with the wording, and we don't need to do that here, but I think we can combine it with priority 2. Okay. Number 8 is pursue regional collaboration with other open space committees, Jeffco, Broomfield. One thought that is listed here is that, you know, we could continue to do this. On the other hand, we could also switch this year to be focusing on Boulder County, figuring out how to reach out to Boulder County to learn from them about their shift in focus. I keep bringing this one up, but shift in focus from acquisition to management. You know, I think we could learn a lot from them. I don't even know how to get in the door to talk to anybody there about this. And hopefully it would be the kind of thing where we could come and ask them to give us a 30-minute presentation or overview of the philosophy change, but more importantly, what that means in terms of what the work that they do, but also how does it impact their committees. You know, and I don't even know if they're structured in a committee, but I believe they are. And so with this kind of goes with the whole change to, you know, our focus, that we're thinking it could be a pretty interesting thing to take on as we're potentially changing our focus. So thoughts? I mean, we could keep them both, or we could focus on one or the other.
Well, would it be a change to BOCO, or would it just be an additional emphasis looking at BOCO? I don't think what you're saying is that we disregard the work that we're doing with Jeffco and Broomfield.
Well, I mean, a little bit of history here. This has only come together once in the 4 years I've been on the committee to meet with one of these other open space committees. So the way that it usually works out is we take one of our meetings and we meet jointly with them. And so actually I have this listed as 0. This really needs to be a 2-hour time slot because it takes up a meeting. Logistically, a lot of times this is difficult to get these things scheduled. We thought we had Broomfield lined up this year. Early on we had started, and you know, COVID has made that more difficult. I mean, it's a good question. We could try to do both. We're lucky to pull off one of them, I guess, is my only thought.
I am torn. I mean, I've been on longer than you, Ryan, and we've only done it twice. So and each was with Louisville. Our purpose really was to try to inform those other entities what our priorities with open space were and ascertain what their priorities were. Even though Zaharias maybe and CenturyLink are wrapping up, those entities still have parcels that are possible for open space. And I don't know if that changes people's thoughts on it. Like if you look on the other side of CenturyLink, on the other side of the highway, there's parcels there that are up for sale. And then if you look on the other side of 36 in Louisville, obviously there's that whole parcel there. So they still have parcels that abut us that would impact our town. I don't know. That's my only input on it.
I mean, in theory, I'd love having, love having that input, but it seems like we would need to know each one of those counties' priorities each year. And that's just not happening, right? We've never had it with Broomfield and
Yeah, I agree
Louisville.
that
We're
it
getting
doesn't
it
happen.
every third year. Now, do good things come out of those conversations? I think they do. I mean, I don't know of really anything actionable that came out of Louisville, except it was interesting to hear them talk about what they had gone through with wayfinding and the approach that they took, and it was pretty clever, and learned a lot from that. So my concern with this is that if we got both, now we're talking 2 meetings that are tied up with a third, an external entity. And so now of our 24 hours, we're at 4 hours that are tied up. I don't necessarily know that that's bad. So maybe we need to just keep it and see which one, and try and see which one sticks. I mean, maybe what we list this as other open space committees, maybe we say, BOCO, Jeffco, and then Broomfield, something like that, and try to reach out. And maybe with Boulder County, what we find is that, a subcommittee could actually go meet with them, and it doesn't need to take up a meeting, and we could learn, or other ways to learn and bring it back to the group, and then we could still have meetings with the other regional towns.
I mean, honestly, we could even tackle the Jeffco and Broomfield, learning about their priorities. Yes, we wouldn't be sharing our priorities with them, but we could have a subcommittee that kind of focuses on that as well. Just, whether it's looking at their agendas or being at their meetings or whatever, if that's something that we want to do, I think there are ways to do that in a subcommittee as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to make that specific, or do we want to leave this somewhat general and then try to figure it out what we want to do as we assign work and get into Q1 next year?
I'm a big fan of general.
I mean, because we may find that as we start assigning work that people are assigned, and then this would be, something else that needs to get assigned to them, and it might be too much. I don't know. And it's also something that we could pick up later in the year if things, were slow. The interesting thing with our work plans is they seem to be front end loaded, and then not as much in the middle. But what always happens is things in our standing updates come up. Like last year, reviewing Zaharias and doing work on all those plans. I mean, that took probably 4 to 5 hours of our meetings, of something that wasn't scheduled, right? That the board asked us to do. And it was important that we did it, and it's part of our ongoing work, but there's always those kind of things. And so we need to not schedule, every hour, so we have time to work on those things. But if we're finding we don't have enough to do, it's good to have these other ones that are a little vague so that we can try to figure out what to do.
should we maybe consider pushing this into Q2 or Q3 as our charter change, if it happens, may have an impact what we want to talk about with other open space committees?
Raina, the only reason we put it here is that this is when we start reaching out. So this year we reached out to Broomfield and they said, sure, we can meet with you in Q3 or Q4.
Okay.
So my only concern about putting it later is that it wouldn't happen within the year.
Understood.
So the reach out is, you know, deciding where to reach out is pretty quick in Q1. But it's a good question. I appreciate it. Okay, I think this is good. And then we added this other one in green here to add the charter and name change. So because it looks like we're going that route, nothing's definitive, but I think we almost have to have this one in, at least to start in Q1. I don't think we'll get it in Q1, but I'm wondering, I mean, this I think needs to probably not be the 9th priority. This probably needs to be priority 2. And then everything else I think will be the same. Anyone disagree? Okay. All right. Any other things that people want to talk about or put into talk about changing for Q1? Okay, let's go to Q2. Develop our budget recommendations for town open space projects. I mean, we've already talked about that we're going to be doing this, and we, Karen, the committee coordinator, specifically asked us to do this at a certain spot. And I think it was right about the end of Q2 or the beginning of Q3. So, you know, this one doesn't need to be, I mean, the priority doesn't mean when we do it in the quarter, but budget recommendations are super important. And so I think this one makes sense. This one is pretty interesting. So this would be the trail ranking, the annual update of the trails priority plan and recommendation. So this is the same document that we just approved. Just to give everybody a little bit of background of how we even got to this place of ranking trails was that, and Tracy, you may remember when this started, but it was probably 5 or 6 years ago. There was a desire within, I think, OSAC and probably ProStack that, you know, the open space fund was growing. There weren't any immediate acquisitions. There's all these trails that we could build. So let's put together a list of rank ordered trails and start to use open space funds to build these trails. It was called the 5-year expedited trail plan. That's how it was originally phrased. And then when doing it, I think one trail from the list was built in that process since we've started doing this. The other things that happened was that Wildflower Park was built, and to build it, the town had to borrow from the open space fund. And at that time, we said no more expedited trails because we need to have some money in case an acquisition comes around for open space. That finally got paid back this year. So the original plan was that we were going to get back to building these trails with open space funds starting in 2021. And now we have CenturyLink. So the reason I bring this up is the whole reason we were doing this has changed considerably. And I think that spending our time on number 6 here on how to specifically develop trails in Coyote Ridge would be more valuable time spent than updating a trail ranking list that hasn't really been used. But I'm open to, or definitely would like to hear other people's opinions on that.
And the other thing that we had talked about, or Ryan and I had talked about when we went over this, was we just approved, we're just sending that to the board now, and it's November. So even if randomly in April or May, they were like, hey, what's your trail priority? It hasn't even been a year since we've completed the process. So I felt, I'm not going to speak for Ryan, but I felt pretty comfortable saying you can use 2020's priorities plan. We don't, that we were fine with the fact that if we take it off, then it's not something we do, and that we'd be relying on this year's plan.
Thank you, Kate and Ryan, for proposing this. This would be incredible. I would be so grateful.
Well, and this is also when we split out the trails from, like, part of the resistance here was that we did it with ProStack. And when we can figure that out, right, this also opens up the door to changing this. My other view on this is, let's say magically some pool of money came available to build trails. We could always come back to this if the board so desired and asked us to. The other nuance to this is that US 36 regional trail is the priority for the town to build, right? This is that extender where it crosses over by a vista over 36 to come on our side of 36 under 88th and down through Autry Park off into Broomfield. That's got a pretty big price tag. And so I mean, the probability of even getting to trail 1 on our list this year just to me seems so low that this seems like it's an easy decision to make. Okay, awesome.
So we are at 7:48. Are people okay continuing forward?
Does anyone have a time estimate?
We're making really good progress. I think we've
Okay.
got another 20 minutes here, and then I would think we've got another 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
I mean, if anyone does have a time issue, I totally understand. Okay. Have a presence at Arbor Day, something we've always done. I don't see why we would change that this year. Host National Trails Day event. Right, we've always done it. We should continue, in my opinion. Readdress the Shanshan project, finalize design phase, address BOCO regional connectivity. The only reason we marked this yellow is we couldn't remember what the last piece meant, to address the BOCO regional connectivity. Does anyone remember what that piece was of this?
I should, but I don't. That is a Sean
I know.
expertise issue. We might have to email him about it. We might have to pull from the past.
Well, I think we just need to figure out what we want to do next year for Shanshan.
It was a realignment, if you can remember. It was like moving the trail, and Joel probably knows it too, but I'm not the trail guru.
You're right. It was moving it on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't know beyond that. So speak up, Brian, if you know more details.
I just think that I don't think we need to call that out specifically. I think we just need to keep working on the amenities, and we have a well-defined list and presentation. And this one, to me, just being as vague as it is, it's hard, you know, it can add some confusion to the item.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm just, for historical purposes, there was something about connecting downtown Superior into that in order to make it flow into BOCO. But yeah, I agree with you. We can just leave it, work on Shanshan and Ormond Roche.
I was just going to say that we need to change the name of that item.
What are we calling that lower portion? Are we calling it Lower Ormond Roche, or what are we calling it? I mean, it's still.
I just think we call it future amenities for Ormond Roche. I mean, we've got it outlined on where it should go. I don't think we have to be specific. You know, I do think though that should we put something in here to be, I mean, I think one mistake we made this year was not presenting at the budget meeting. I think that was one of the reasons that our ask out of general fund got lost. And do you think we should put right in here to pitch in person, you know, at the budget meeting?
Yes, that's a great idea. I do.
Absolutely. If we have the option to be there, we should be there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Look at that. I didn't even read that far, but Kate already had that down. So I think this looks good. And then, well, I guess we already discussed it, but we want to replace 2 with number 6. And I think we should just swap the the priority, like move 6 into 2, and then we're good. Really, 3 and 4 don't really take any meeting time at all. They're really just, hey, who can make it to the event and making sure that we have staffing there. So, these are some good chunky things to work in Q2 that we can spend a good amount of time on. So and these I think will be a lot of fun to work on, right? We're continuing to conceptualize and build. And like Mark was saying, really trying to visualize what Coyote Ridge could be. I think I think we'll get into a lot of discussion over many different meetings on what that could be. I think that there'll be significant public interest in providing input, and we might even try to figure out to do some outreach, on what is the most important issue that people see in that space. So my guess is we won't even get to the point of making a recommendation to build anything next year, but it'll be a lot of fun thinking about how to properly utilize that space. Anyway, that doesn't help in our work plan, but I'm excited about that one. Okay, any other changes or anything for Q2? Okay, moving on to Q3, having a presence at COSA conference. So hopefully COVID is under control and someone can go next year. So for Tracy and Cara, this is the Colorado Open Space Alliance Conference. It's 2 or 3 days. It's usually in a mountain town. The year I went, it was in Steamboat. Last year it was going to be in Vail. Just really interesting talks on kind of, there aren't actually a lot of open space volunteers there. It's mostly Parks and Rec staff that are there. But just really interesting group of people to talk to. One afternoon is an outing, so you get to go and be in the outdoors, out in the mountains in September. It's really if anyone can get away and do it, it's a sweet deal. 4th of July. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I want to make a plug for it, Ryan. This is where we found Justin Spring. So there's a lot of great connections to be made and a lot of things to learn that we have used in OSAC over the past several years. So I agree. It's awesome.
I agree. Groundhogs are a big thing that we were thinking about. There were multiple presentations about groundhog management and thoughts. And, maybe that's actually how we start to build these other relationships locally to find the experts on these. You're right. I wasn't thinking about the groundhogs as much then. And I kind of wish I was, because I would have made a point to go talk to those people. So
and it's also
anyway,
pretty unique that advisory committee members go. It's mostly staff members that work in the towns. And so I went, I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and people were so excited that I was there as an advisory committee member. So
I agree. Okay. 4th of July and Chili Fest, these are events we go to every year. So that's, again, it's not much work. It's just managing the schedule of who will be there and when. Receive a presentation from town staff on open space related budget items and expenses. This one always comes up and I always scratch my head saying, what exactly are we asking for here?
Can I provide context, Ryan?
Yeah.
It's in there because we never got, in the past, we didn't get comprehensive details on how much exactly we had to spend for parcels, how much we had in our fund and the history on it. So that's how it ended up in there. But now you have done that amazing, incredibly valuable work on our budget. So I don't know that it's necessary because we already have that thing. I think it's Q1 that you have that.
Yeah, that's what we were looking at. We're like, what is the difference between it's up here somewhere. Yeah, number 6 here versus this one. And it might have been an update on if there were budget items from the open space fund in that year, what is the status on those? But this one always just comes up and I kind of scratch my head and talk to Allison and we're like, yeah, what do we do with this? So if there's something specific here, let's put it in. But if not, I think we should remove it.
I think it should be removed and then just if putting it in the agenda as a standing update.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we do that anyway, but if it feels better to people to have it just as a standing update.
I agree
that's
with
fine.
Kate. It feels better for me to have it, just given the history. But standing update is awesome.
And the standing update, okay. Let me just bold this, that's how we'll do this, because then we'll get it as we need it and it's not in a specific quarter. And so maybe we need to just move that down here somewhere. So update on any open space funding projects or something like that. Okay, that looks good. Review properties based on the criteria developed earlier in the quarter. Okay, so while we're not going to rank trails, we still think we should rank open space. But definitely open for discussion, right? There may not be any changes to the open space to rank, even though we did decide that we thought Ridge 2 should be in our ranking process, much like Town 15 is. So there's already a change that we've identified for next year, but
there may not be changes, but this is important for all members to do, because if we don't address it, then we don't have that ranking if the board ever desires to have it. And that's been valuable to them in the past.
right. I mean, I could play devil's advocate, and from 2005 to 2018, there was never an update. So there is some history that this wasn't updated, but I agree. Like, I think it's the most important thing we do. And it's the same conversation from last year that, you know, our whole charter is to acquire open space. And if we're not looking at that, at least, you know, it also forces us to just think about the issues around those properties, that if it doesn't come up some other way once a year. And
exactly,
it'd be silly to just not do that. So, okay. What we wanted to do though is, Kate, I think what you were saying here earlier in the quarter, that we'd like to have one meeting where we really dig into the ranking process and then kick off the ranking after that. And so I don't know if it needs to be a separate line item, but it felt like we rushed that this year and don't want to rush going through the ranking, you know, the whole discussion about what is our process.
Yes, that was where that was coming from, is that we start in quarter 3. The first thing we do regarding the review of properties is to create our criteria, because it felt unclear this year for whatever reason. Or I think for new people, it definitely felt unclear, for first timers doing that. So I think we could do a better job of just making sure that we, you know, lay the groundwork early in the quarter. The second month of the quarter, maybe we actually do the work, and then the third month we come together and actually talk it over. And then the other piece for I'm using my mouse as if you guys can see what I'm pointing at, which is awesome. It's great. For number 5, the other piece of that actually was, we wanted to make sure that, again, early in the quarter, is that pre-work with the property review item. And that's the document, Tracy, that you worked on with Manager Maglia, and just kind of gaining those contextual pieces so that we have that all early to be able to provide. So when we go about the ranking, everybody has all the information and doesn't feel discombobulated.
Great idea.
So I think almost what we're getting at here is this breaks up into 2 items. It replaces this. So the first item is to review the criteria and review the open space continuity document. And then the second item is to rank and review the properties, because there is a third item here, which is the review and update the open space summary report, right? This is the actual deliverable from all of that. So I think that 2 items in third quarter and then this item in fourth quarter seems like a good, I like the change. I think it'll add better structure and make it clearer what we're doing. Okay. Well, that was a nice segue into fourth quarter, but anything for third quarter that we missed? Okay. So then the open space summary report, work plan, the 2020 outdoor education program, we marked that red, and we should mark it red with an asterisk, but this was just on the assumption that that work moves to ProStack. And that's why we had marked it red to remove. So I'm marking it with an asterisk just because we need to make sure that that is the final decision. So I don't know how we annotate that on our work plan. Maybe we just annotate, maybe we leave it, but with an asterisk that if we get, when we get that done, this should come off. I don't know. If we remove it, it might be out of sight, out of mind. That's my only concern when you remove something from a document. So let's just do it that way. Determine annual public outreach and education program events. What we felt was this is a duplicate of what we were doing in Q1. So, oh wait. Well, the public, yeah, wait a second. No,
I think this was more of the discussion that we kind of had this evening with Allison regarding upcoming 2021 outdoor programming, because we
Yeah.
usually do that during Q4 where we talk about what is Ashley going to
Yeah.
be doing. And so since it sounds like ProStack is going to absorb that, then that doesn't likely need to be there.
and those two were related, really. I mean, it was to evaluate what we did this year and figure out what we're going to do next year. And maybe we had them as 2 line items because one meeting was to evaluate and think about what did we like, what did we not like, and then come back around at another meeting to determine what we would do the next time, which we did
Yes.
in 15 minutes.
And we always
tonight.
talked about adding other things. Are we going to focus on different programs and get different speakers? And I think that's how that happened.
Right. Okay. So I'll leave that with an asterisk. We did want to add, I mean, we always did it, but we didn't have it on here, was to add the BOCO annual submission of open space and trail requests. I mean, we always do it and we wouldn't not do it, but it makes sense to have it on our work plan to make sure that we go over it. And, you know, a lot of times we get the responses earlier in the year, but we don't, you know, it's nice to actually review those, you know, more than once a year, just because we forget. Maybe, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we do this anyway, so we wanted to have it on the work plan. Okay, getting into ongoing, I think Kate brings up a really good question here that, you know, what is the purpose of maintaining all of these ongoing tasks? Should we rename them to a category, something like project monitoring, or are they just items that we should be looking out for? Because ongoing implies that we will do work, you know, almost evaluate these things at every meeting, that do we need to discuss it? Where in reality, most of these things are event driven, right? Something happens and then we know that we should go react to these kind of things. So it's more of a reminder list of things that we see in board agendas or things we hear community members talk about or we see on social media that, you know, we should get ahead of as it's part of our mission statement to do that. So I thought that that was a really good proposal from Kate to call it something else. I don't know what we call it, but I like the monitoring or the some other term there than ongoing. Any thoughts?
Love it. Great idea.
So project monitoring, are we good with that?
Monitoring is good. I think it shows up in 4 or 5 of the line items anyway. So
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so this list is identical to last year with the exception for the colored items. You know, we marked this one red because the ConocoPhillips development plan that was coming is now, I don't know if it's dead, but Medtronic is now looking at a new site. And so I don't know what the status of that is. I mean, we could keep it on here, but that one was very specific to knowing that there was a pretty big development plan coming right on our border that we should be aware of. So, you know,
I agree with you on that. My only suggestion would be up at the top where in Q, what was that? Where we talked about Broomfield and Jeffco, just adding Louisville to that. It was Q1, number 8 or wherever you moved it to. It's not critical because we just met with Louisville, but
no, these are our regional partners. So yes, I agree. I mean, and there's something in here implied that we do, you know, that we monitor the pulse of the community for anything related to open space, whether it's in Superior or not. And if we feel like it's bubbling up far enough, we would bring it up. So I'm just wondering if we need to weave that in here or if that's just implied that that's what we do and that we don't need to have a work item for that.
I'll stop beating the history dead horse, but it was not implied in the past. And I like that notion that you just expressed.
Maybe we could amend, can you continue to monitor board agenda and regional, I mean, chatter isn't a real technical word, but regional information or regional issues.
Yeah, issues, happenings, occurrences, events, changes.
Yeah, let's see, continue to monitor board agenda and regional, I don't know what the right word is, but we'll get a word in here. But just the regional part, I think is good there. And then I think that that's okay to remove 4 if we make that change.
I think I meant to color code number 6 too as
Okay.
something. I
Yeah.
apologize for leaving
No,
that
that's
one
okay.
off.
So we'll fill this in. We'll come up with some wording when we do the final review of this. So then, yeah, the oil and gas developments that could impact Superior residents. This one is hard for me because we put this on due to a very specific event that happened and also a member that was had volunteered to track this and provide updates. You know, the oil and gas issues have changed quite a bit with the new setbacks and everything that have come in. I feel like this falls into the monitor board agendas and regional issues. And because there isn't a specific issue we're looking out for, that I don't think we need to call it out specifically in the work plan, but open to what people think.
I'll just chime in real quick and just say that I support moving this off of your priorities list. You've got a lot on your work plan, and it really is not a threat to the town insofar as OSAC should need to spend time really worrying about it, is my suggestion.
All right. Thanks, Mark. That's helpful. Okay. So that helps, that even pushes that one further for me. I think we're good. So I don't know if I mean, do we want to read all the other ones, or are we all comfortable that they were there and that we don't think we need to change them? I mean, I'm fine to go either way. A lot of these are monitoring different things that are going on that we'll assign out at the beginning of the year.
I think the only thing that, I don't think it's relevant right now, but I think number 9 in the project monitoring around the Raptor program may need to turn into something regarding wildlife monitoring, if that is a way that we choose to go, but we can when we have the charter and name change. But I think we can amend our work plan at that point in time. So as we currently exist, I think this is fine, but I think that piece will have to get changed in some capacity in the future with a change.
I mean, let's take the prairie dog issue that we spent a fair bit of time on this year. Where does that fit into this work plan?
It does not.
Yeah.
We have
right.
nothing regarding wildlife. There's no verbiage on wildlife
Well,
whatsoever.
and we changed this last year. So in the previous year work plan, it was to find and encourage, work on wildlife encouragement type activities. And last year we said, look, we really struggled in the past. This year we found the Raptor program. So let's just put that one in and really focus on that. So do we want to put something wildlife in here, or do we want to wait until we potentially change the charter?
I think we should wait until we have a clear charter.
I think a little differently, and that it would be nice to add it back in because it's the natural transition regardless of changing the charter or not. But I'm open to, I'm flexible. I'm
No, I
digging in my heels
think,
on it. I like your point that we had it on there for years and we talked about it for years. Antelope and ferrets and all sorts of stuff, and then we just took it off last year.
But remember, it wasn't necessarily a focus. And I do think, though, as we move more to this other mode of operation, it will become more of a focus.
You're right. It was a conversation piece.
Right. We do need to remove this merge with the breeding bird survey. Kate, was this your comment? Or was this in the work plan last year?
I think it was in the work plan last year.
And the volunteers have said that they definitely do not want these to be commingled, that one is sponsored by OSAC and one is truly a town it serves a different purpose and it's not sponsored by OSAC, and so that they shouldn't be merged. So I recommend we strike that out. Okay. So do we want to add wildlife encouragement? Do we want to go just add a line item here? Just mainly as a reminder that as we rework our charter to make sure we encompass that, but if we don't, let's say something happens and we don't rework the charters, it would be I think it was an oversight to remove it because we did do a fair amount of work on it this year with the prairie dogs. And I do understand Rainer's point, but I do think we should add it back just to have it there.
Or do we change number 9 to just be more vague and say continue to develop and implement wildlife programming?
I like fewer line items.
Okay.
How about superior Yeah, so let's reword this to be more general wildlife. We don't need to do it now. But mention the raptors. Okay. And then we, do we need to put all standing updates? I guess we do. I guess everything in our standing updates is in this project monitoring, and we do want to monitor, how funds are being spent if it applies. I mean, right now in our budget, there's nothing for next year that's a special project for the open space. But years before, remember the creek reconstruction and other things that were coming out of our fund, and so I'm okay with this. I mean, this has some pretty chunky things in it, right? It's got the continuing on Ormond Roche. It's got Coyote Ridge management. It's got, trying to work with Boulder County to learn more about how to transition to be a more management based than acquisition based, all of our outreach. And then who knows what'll come to the town in terms of development plans that we'll need to spend time on or other issues. So this feels good to me, but I open to further discussion on what people would like to see changed.
I think you both did a great job.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think we have the outlines of a work plan. So what we'll do is we'll wordsmith it, clean up the colors, and then we'll bring it in January to approve. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. So the last agenda item was to discuss the OSSRR update. Did people have, I mean, I don't know how we want to do this. My changes were really pretty minor. We could go through the changes real quick and look at them and see if there's any concerns. The hope was that people looked at them before the meeting, but I know that doesn't always happen. We also don't need to make the recommendation today. I'm okay with, because we're just getting it done, we could do this in January also. But how would people like to proceed? I mean, actually, why don't I quickly run through the differences?
I think if we can get it recommended tonight, let's try and do that, just because, again, January Q1, everything's big. So let's try and close this one out.
I agree. Okay. So I've got to just remember how to do this. This feature in Word is pretty cool. Review, compare two versions. I'm getting a little slow at the end of the day here. Okay, so here's the 2019 doc. Here is the 2020 doc. Yes. And so what it does is that in the center here, it shows things struck out or highlighted as to what changed. And then the upper right is last year's document, and then the lower right is this year's document. So just going through the changes, the first ones we come to are dates. Obviously, this is subject to change based on when we get this finished. Changing people's names that are part of the committee and thanking previous committee members, pretty standard. The table of contents changed really to remove Rogers Farm and CenturyLink, because those are no longer potential open space acquisitions. Everything else stayed the same.
Hey, Brian, on
Yep.
previous committee members, I don't know how far back you're going. You put Marcy, you didn't put Sean. It's totally your preference. I don't know what your guiding principle is.
Oh gosh. I guess it would be who started, who was working on who did the rankings and worked on the work, right? If they left before we started this, and
Sure.
Sean had
Yeah.
had gone off before we started their rankings.
Sounds good.
So a few little comments in here. You know, we've secured way more acreage than we had before. So now it's 277 instead of 95. Just and a note about, you know, a big increase in 2020 with the CenturyLink property, and that there's 5 properties that are available. Right here, we talk about the history of the different versions that were published. And I just added in the version that we published last year. So this is Rev 4 of the document. Going down, the map is updated. Thank you, Allison. Allison worked her magic to remove Rogers Farm and remove CenturyLink. So this is what the map looks like now. It's really pretty sparse. It's pretty crazy when you look at it. When you look at it compared to the original map when the open space was, or the fund was started, it's really pretty cool how much has been done. Then as we go through the properties, the only thing I touched was to delete the CenturyLink and the Rogers Farm section. I didn't change any of the other wording on the other properties. And then I included the rankings, the table from this year. The interesting thing, the one thing that maybe we do need to discuss is I said from the rankings, right in the last we said it was clear that there were 2 groups. There was a high group and a low group. When I looked at these, it really looked like there were really 3 groupings, right? There was a high group, kind of a medium and a low. And so I changed the wording slightly. I said it became clear there were 3 groups of projects. 2 were in the top tier, including Zaharias and Town 15. I didn't know how to reconcile this 5.8, which is almost exactly in the middle of these 2, and calling that in the top tier or the bottom. But the point being that even if we have 3 tiers, the whole point of that statement is that there are the top tier, we have a top tier, and there's 2 properties within that top tier. Moving on, I didn't change anything in the financial discussion. There's the old map. I did change some of the history here. So now that CenturyLink was purchased, I put in the statistics of that. Rogers Farm had some slight change in the description. And really, that's all that changed in the document from last year. So it's really pretty minor. So anyone want to put more effort into this, or do we want to go with what we have? Okay, awesome. And actually, I don't want to rush it. So if people do have any comments or questions, I mean, just for Tracy and Cara, this is the outcome of our trail ranking. So we do all this work, and then this is the document that we submit to the board, and that ends up on our website. That whole big spreadsheet that we had with all the members and all the ranking and all the criteria, that stays as a document that we generated that goes into this report. Okay, well, hearing no other discussion, I need to go back to this and say, if there's no other discussion, the recommendation that I have written is OSAC recommends the town board accept the 2020 open space summary report and recommendations document. Any changing to the wording? Okay, I would like to make a recommendation as previously read. Can I get a second?
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, Kate, do you have the votes? Okay, it passes unanimously. Awesome. It is 8:26. We are through all the items. And so I would say that unless some emergency topic comes up, that we will not have a December meeting. For those of you that are new, normally we would take that time and have a dinner to celebrate the year. I'll probably send out an email. I'd normally like to get up and remind everybody of all the accomplishments we've had during the year. This year's been especially good, but I'll probably do that in an email, maybe on the day of that next meeting. But it's fun to wrap up with all the great work we've done. So I'd say the meeting for next time is canceled. And then we can go through really quickly, we'll just go through the updates and look aheads. And I just gotta go open the agenda again. It's right here. The updates and look aheads will go really quick. So as you all saw, we did take the naming to the board. I really enjoy the conversation that went on with the board. Mark almost got open space, McOpen space passed, but at the end it's Coyote Ridge open space. But
you don't know how close it was actually in retrospect. And
I watched, I could tell it was close.
I'm really
I think
disappointed,
if we
Mark.
recalled the vote, it could have been different.
We were really hoping you could get us something unique.
But I think
it's my one regret as an elected official that I didn't make that happen right now.
So I took two really interesting takeaways from this conversation that I just thought was really, really valuable, that when we look at names, to do a Google search and see if there are other things similar that are close by, because this, finding the wrong place and going there it's not a huge deal, but it's just good to know that data. But I think, to Mark's point, naming something whimsical and fun like that will draw attention to it. The fact that we named it Coyote Ridge Open Space most likely won't make the daily camera. I don't know if it did, but open space, McOpen space certainly, or maybe not certainly, but would have, right? And so I think when we're doing our CenturyLink planning, that we can think a little bit differently about, we're going to have a trailhead, we're going to have trails. So the naming part of this really isn't over. So good takeaways of how we will look at CenturyLink going forward. So anyway, thanks for the entertainment on that one, Mark. That was fun. Maybe not for you all, but it was fun to watch.
It was fun.
So standing updates. So Rocky Mountain Greenway, Joel isn't here. I don't know if anyone has any other updates. Mark, did you go to the meeting on that recently, or was that Ken that went maybe with Neil? I don't remember. There was an update on it at the last board meeting.
I gave an update on just the fact that the city and county of Broomfield, they just voted to exit whatever the consortium of governments that is basically the organization behind the Rocky Mountain Greenway, because part of the Greenway is going to go through Broomfield on the west side. They voted to leave that group. So it's not going to necessarily prevent the Greenway from happening, but they're not going to have, Broomfield's cooperation in that project anymore.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but when that first came up, I think the town of Superior did not join and was maybe the only municipality at the time that did not join. I mean, the town
I don't know
really
the history on that actually.
It was a pretty strong stance of saying, absolutely, we think that trails through a Superfund cleanup site is a bad idea, and we won't be any part of promoting that in any way. It was
Well,
I mean,
I think that's a pretty widely held opinion in the town of Superior. I certainly subscribe to that one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's nice to see Broomfield is changing their tune on this also.
No, we're very fortunate that we have a city council in Broomfield right now that is doing the right things on a lot of different issues. But open space protection, protection of the environment is definitely one of their guiding lights and purposes. So I'm very encouraged by just what they're doing, because all this stuff impacts us on a regional level. So it's good to have people in positions of power where they're doing the right thing. So
That's fantastic. It's, I've been seeing it from Broomfield, but getting your perspective on that is really good to hear. So I appreciate that. Okay, the Raptor program, I guess there was some back and forth with Frank about a few little issues. Peter got his equipment for the group. We saw an email that came out, and it looks like recruiting for him for next year is already off to a fantastic start. So I think we're in a good place there. We do need to, and I've got it in my list of items, but in the last meeting, we discussed that there were good recommendations out of his document that we wanted to run by Ashley and then put together a short PowerPoint that we presented to the board just to bring those issues in front of the group. And so that'll be work that we'll do. We can get the PowerPoint going and hopefully present it to the board early on in next year.
Brian, I had one question about this that relates to raptors a little bit. We talked about last meeting, following up with Allison on if any of the trees planted were plains cottonwoods, and we can move that if you need to, Allison, to January, but I just didn't want that to get lost either.
Well, I think we were going to include that in that whole, because I think that was one of the recommendations. But yeah, Allison, if you know anything there.
Yeah, so they have not been planted in that area yet, but there is going to be some work coming up in that area. And so I think the plan is when those parks and more of that work is coming online, everything's going to be, moving around. There's going to be machinery in that area. So as soon as those parks, that work gets underway and there's going to be more planting, and then the plan is that all those are going to be made sure that species is there. The other before I forget, raptor issue is we do have a resident that's offered to put one of the bird boxes in their yard and supply the Wi-Fi at no cost. And I did want to touch base with the group on how they felt about this, because if it goes to something like this goes to a private resident, how that's managed, I'm not sure. We haven't ever had that type of offer before. I mean, residents have put their own bird boxes in, but we have had this offer, so I did want to touch base with the group on that.
Allison, did you have a chance to reach out to legal and just see what sort of issues we might have in terms of liability? I mean, let's say that thing sparks and catches on fire and burns this person's house down. Is the town then liable for something? I just don't know how that would work.
Yeah, I would have to touch base, and kind of bring it up the line. And we haven't done that yet. We haven't explored it because I wanted to talk to the group first.
I mean, I like it as a solution because we really hadn't been able to figure out. I mean, it's been almost a year since last year about this time, we were trying to get those installed, and you were doing so much work trying to figure out, where can we put these where they're somewhat protected, but they have power and Wi-Fi, and turned out to be really hard to figure out. And if this is a good solution, I think we should try it, but I just want to be careful that the town, is protected and it doesn't create any unintended consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. I would of course go through all of that, but initially I just wanted the group to know that this offer has been made, and were you interested in exploring that?
I mean, I say heck yeah, but but that's my opinion. If anyone doesn't think we should, please speak up.
So what is the exact offer from that citizen?
So the citizen is offered to allow this bird box, this box that's like 2 by 3 by 6 inches, to be installed on their property with supplying power and Wi-Fi to a camera. So the goal would be to have a webcam on a bird box within the town.
I support it as long as Peter thinks the location is appropriate.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess I
Do-
just have questions about the feed. How do we, like, do they control the feed? Does the town control the feed? How do we get access so that we actually can show residents that this is happening?
You know, and one option for that might be, you know, it's recorded in the cloud and then it may not be real time, but, you know, that maybe there's pictures or some periodic feeds that, you know, are downloaded or something like that.
Well, and there's all sorts of, from COSA, I learned that there's all sorts of pretty simple cameras that are motion activated so that you're not recording all the time, and then it would only, you know, we could figure out how to do something like that. But I agree, there's logistics we need to figure out, right? If this is somebody's network, how do we kind of slice it off so that it's available, you know, to the town? But I think it's, you know, Allison, time permitting, I think it's worth seeing if it's feasible, because the other work was so hard, you know, was so difficult. But if this is easy, I think we should try it. And it doesn't, you know, it's not super urgent, right? It doesn't have to be done. You know, it's just when you get some time to not get around to it, but work on it, that's fine, right? So cool. That'd be awesome though, to have a bird webcam in town. Just need to get some birds there, but we'll let the experts worry about that. Okay, oil and gas. Again, this was normally Marcy's issue. I don't know of anything to bring up, but if anybody has anything on this issue, I mean, next, because we're changing our work plan, this will come off of the standing updates for next year, just as an FYI. Okay. And then the soft shoulder trail project, that was something that Joel was working on with ProStack.
I have a brief update for you right on that.
Oh yeah, cool.
All I know is that Leslie is working on ballpark quotes to get a better idea of next steps for this project. So it's not
Okay.
up to bid. She's just trying to get a general idea of figures.
So in my talkings with Todd about this project, one thing that he was mentioning that you know, there's a certain cost to put down the gravel next to the concrete, but the other thing that has to be considered is there's typically a lot of irrigation sprinkler heads that are right next to the concrete. So it's not just moving sod and putting down gravel. Now sprinkler heads all have to be moved, and sometimes control boxes are that close. So there are more logistics to this. It would be easier to build the trails this way than it's going to be to retrofit them, but you know, still possible, and we'll see what happens. Okay, it is 8:40. We are adjourned.
Hey, can I just bring up one quick thing?
Sure.
At the next board meeting, we'll be doing committee assignments, and I don't know who on the board is going to try to, you know, fight me to the death to be the OSAC liaison. It's a highly coveted position on the board, so I can't guarantee that I would be the liaison, and I also don't know whether you guys would want me to stay on. Obviously, Sandy Hammerly was the liaison. She left the board, so I stepped in as the alternate, which was great. But just stay tuned as, you know, things could change. But I always enjoy coming to OSAC meetings and working with you guys. You guys are doing great work.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, I know I would welcome it. I hope that works out in our favor, that you end up on the committee. We've got a long history of working together and doing some pretty great things. So
yes. Can I make an ask, Mark? Would you please consider being our liaison? We will beg and plead you for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, there's like 20 different committees that we all, you know, pick from. And I'm happy with the committee assignments that I have right now, and I'm happy to continue on all of them, essentially. And it's really just a question of what other members on the board want to do. We have 2 new board members. We certainly want to respect their, you know, wishes and interests and desires. So it's all just a little horse trading and
Well,
see
you've
what happens.
you've been a great champion for open space, and we have been really lucky to have all your efforts over the past several years.
Completely agree. Thank you, Tracy. Said it very well. Thanks for that. I'll be watching that meeting to see what happens. Okay, so it is now 8:42. No meeting next month unless there's some emergency issue we need to deal with. So happy holidays, happy new year. We'll be in touch by email, but thank you all again for all you do for our town and for our committee. I appreciate every one of you.
Everybody
Have a
wear your
great evening.
masks.
Yes.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
And
to you.
thanks to Ryan and Kate for all their work. It's been a good year. Take care all.
Thanks, Tracy.